Zoom calls. I'm sorry, I just had a message come up on the screen. That could be done surreptitiously if there is no agreement between you, Your Honor, that you're not going to videotape or audio tape these proceedings. Once we get going, there will be no recesses. We will go from opening statement to closing argument. The only exception to that, or there are two exceptions to that, actually. One is if there's a health emergency, please let me know and we'll try to accommodate that, which will be kind of difficult remotely, but we will take a pause to address that. The other thing is that between the segments of the trial, meaning after the opening statements and before the first witness and then between witnesses, I take a pause to allow the scoring panelists to complete their scoring. So there will be a little bit of delay. And scoring panelists, when you have completed your scoring for each round, would you give me some kind of sign, either verbal or nod of the head on the screen, so that we can get going with the next round? As I'm sure you know that both you as team members and your coaches understand that disputes about the rules have to be decided under these rules, and they're decided by the Colorado Bar Association, and should know how to submit any disputes to the Bar Association. I see that we've had one timekeeper sign in for Team Darrell. Does Holly have a timekeeper?
Yes, Your Honor. I'm the timekeeper for Team Holly.
There you are. Okay. Ms. Burnett, thank you. You should know that, and I gather that you are going to either post a sign so that it can be seen by the participants, or some people will post it by chat. How do you plan to keep track of time, let people know what time is available? Ms. Burnett?
Yes, Your Honor.
How are you going to show the time available?
I request permission to send time in the chat, if that is okay with you.
That is fine with me. And Ms. Blake?
Yes, I'm able to do the same.
All right, very good.
Thank you.
I will keep track of time and will enforce the time limits strictly. So please keep that in mind when you're making your presentations. Now, at this time, I would like each team, starting with the plaintiff, to introduce their attorneys. Plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening, Your Honor, opposing counsel, and members of the jury. My name is Mix Lee Kenny. I use they, them pronouns, and today, along with my co-counsel, we will be representing Mr. Dakota Weirs in the case of Dakota Weirs versus Lush Fertilizer Incorporated. Today, I will be giving the closing argument, giving the direct examination of Dr. Casey Rogers, and the cross-examination of Dr. Devin Williams. May I have permission for my co-counsel to now introduce themselves?
Please do.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Skylar Walta, and I use she, her pronouns. Today, I will be conducting the direct examination of Carson Durst and the cross-examination of Skylar Weirs.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Ms. Morgan Taylor. I use she, her pronouns. And today I will be conducting the direct examination of Mr. Dakota Weirs, the cross-examination of Blake Doncourt, and performing the opening statements. Permission
All right.
for our witnesses to introduce themselves?
Please do.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Mr. Nathan Trong. I use he, him pronouns, and today I am Dakota Weirs.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Mr. J.T. Timmers. I use he, him pronouns, and today I am Carson Durst.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Ms. Grace Trembath. I use she, her pronouns, and today I am Dr. Casey Rogers.
All right, thank you very much. Now, would Team Holly introduce their attorneys first.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Your Honor, and members of the jury, opposing counsel. My name is Angela Wu. I will be conducting the direct examination of Blake Doncourt, the cross-examination of Dakota Weirs, as well as performing the closing argument.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury, and opposing counsel. My name is Kayla Caniglio, and I will be conducting the direct examination of Skylar Weirs and the cross-examination of Dr. Casey Rogers.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury, and opposing counsel. My name is Tara McDermott, and I will be delivering the opening statement as well as conducting the cross-examination of Carson Durst and the direct examination of Dr. Devin Williams. Your Honor, permission to have our witnesses introduce themselves?
Yes, granted.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury, opposing counsel. My name is Jamie Williamson, and I am Blake Doncourt.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury, opposing counsel. My name is Donna Shaw, and I am Skylar Weirs.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Mark Rakhlenko, and I am Dr. Devin Williams.
All right, thank you very much. At this point, I'm going to swear in the team members and the participants. This is something the Bar Association asked the presiding judges to do to emphasize the importance of adhering to the rules and playing this round within the rules of this game. So would all of the team members at this point raise their right hands? Team members, do you promise that the presentation you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition? Witnesses, would you raise your right hands? Do you promise that the testimony you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to your witness statements, that you will not add material facts or opinions which are not contained in the case problem, and that you will follow the rules and procedures of the mock trial competition? Thank you. Scoring panelists, there's an oath for the your parents and hangers-on and things like that, but since they're not here, we won't do that, although they may be lurking on some kind of shadow track room, and we're just going to have to trust them to behave themselves. Scoring panelists, please raise your right hands. Do you promise to adjudicate the mock trial competition as fairly and objectively as possible in accordance with the facts, procedures, and rules of the mock trial competition? Thank you. Now, do the teams have any preliminary matters that they want to bring before the court?
Yes, Your Honor.
Plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor.
The plaintiff
Okay.
would be happy to proceed if you
All
are
right,
ready.
just, yes, in a second, I'm going to ask the scoring panelists to turn off their cameras so that it's a little bit easier for me to see who is talking and what's going on. Thank you very much. All right, plaintiff, Daryl, you have some preliminary matters.
Yes, Your Honor. We have several. Our first preliminary matter is that the crossing attorney keep their camera on throughout the entire direct examination so that objections will be hopefully more efficient.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch you what you said.
That the crossing attorney will keep their camera on during the direct examination of a particular witness, whichever witness they will cross, so that any objections they might make will happen hopefully more efficiently.
Well, yes, that's okay, unless there's an objection from the defense.
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, thank you.
And then we would also ask that plaintiff may reserve time at the end of our closing argument for rebuttal.
That's granted.
And then we would ask, Your Honor, how you would like us to handle sharing exhibits and publishing to the jury in our virtual courtroom space.
Well, I know that different teams do it different ways. If you have the capacity and are practiced in it, you can post it on the Zoom screen, which some people can do. If you can't do that, all of the participants, meaning me and the scoring panelists, have a copy of the case problem, and we have a copy on our computers or on computers of them. And if you want to refer the judges to that copy, that's permitted too.
Yes, Your Honor.
Just
And
let
I
me
would
know how you want to do it.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
The plaintiff intends to screen share before they have admitted the exhibit, to ask the witness questions about that exhibit and then ask specifically for the exhibit to be published. So to assume the jury hasn't seen it until we have asked for it to be published, if that works.
That's acceptable, yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. And then we would also ask that for technical difficulties, including the process of screen sharing, that time be paused for either side.
Well, I think that's fair. I don't think you need to pause time for screen sharing because that usually happens pretty quickly. But if there's a problem, let me know and we'll stop time. All right?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
And then we just have one final preliminary matter.
All right.
Is that only when the plaintiff side is giving their case, that only the plaintiff timer physically put time up. And if there is a dispute, then the timers can discuss it amongst themselves, but it can be distracting for participants to have two different times from two different sides coming at them.
Okay, Team Holly, do you have an objection to that?
No, Your Honor, we request the same for the defense as well.
All right, then that's how we'll do it.
And
Anything else, Ms.
I'm so
Kenny?
sorry. I just remembered one other thing I would like to
All
add,
right.
is that I think we will be sharing time via note cards on the screen, which is slightly different from what we had said. But that's our current plan, if that is all right.
That is fine with me.
Perfect. Thank you, Your Honor. The plaintiff has no further preliminary matters.
All right, thank you. Ms. Wu, do you have any additional preliminary matters?
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, does the court have a copy of the defense's trial rosters?
Not yet, no. But I have written down your names.
Okay, yes, Your Honor. I'm not sure how I would be able to send those to you as well, but that is all.
I've just got a message that they are being emailed, so I will check my email and see if that's come in.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, I have trial rosters, and I'm going to ask the scoring panelists if they have received from the Bar Association via email copies of the trial rosters. Scoring panelists?
Yes, Your Honor, I've received it.
All right,
Yes, Your
that's
Honor.
one. Okay,
I have not, Your Honor.
well, let's see. Mark, would you give me your email address and I'll see if I can send it to you?
Sure. Barry, B-E-R-Y, M as in Mark, P as in Paul, the number 1, Barry MP1 at AOL.com.
All right, let me see what I can do here.
Thank you.
Your Honor, if I may, Mark, check your spam because you are on the email list.
Okay.
Yeah, you can I had mine in spam as well, so.
I do not see it in my spam.
Mark, I just sent it to you, so
Okay.
look out for it.
Got it. Thanks.
All right, very good. Then Team Holly, do you have any other preliminary matters?
Yes, Your Honor. In regards to timing, we ask that timelines are able to communicate using the Zoom chat feature to avoid time discrepancies.
I think, well, yes, you're in different places, so that's probably the most efficient way to do it. That's fine.
Your Honor, we request that in the case someone is disconnected, they would be able to text another teammate so that the situation could be communicated, but only then could text be used.
That's acceptable, yes. Just let me know that, just let me know that what's going on. Of course, that may not be possible if you have technical difficulties, but we'll just work it out as we can.
Yes, Your Honor. And Your Honor, we ask that exhibits be deemed to be published to the jury upon being admitted into evidence. Just want to
We've
clarify.
already covered that, yes.
Yes, Your Honor. Okay, perfect. No further preliminary matters, Your Honor.
All right, thank you very much. With that, I think we are ready to go for plaintiff's opening statement.
Well, Your Honor, may I proceed?
Yes, you may.
Thank you, Your Honor. How would you go about turning green into gold? Lush Fertilizer will stop at nothing in the pursuit of their gold, no matter who is in their way. A young man's future has been stolen from him by an avaricious corporation that is blinded by green, the hunt for money masked behind the facade of environmentalism. My co-counsel and I have seen the plaintiff, Dakota Weirs, express his newfound struggles, and today we will share his story with you. Members of the jury, I ask you to listen to Mr. Weirs' experiences, and you will see the consequences of Lush Fertilizer trying to turn green into gold. They saw Drufo as their golden goose and didn't think about the lives that would be taken in pursuit of their green future. Lush didn't consider Dakota and possibly countless others whose lives will never be the same. We will begin our case by calling Dakota Weirs to the stand, where he will share with you his love for the outdoors and playing piano. And you will learn that his passions were stolen from him by non-Hodgkin lymphoma. He will describe the physical and mental pain he suffers day after day, and the emotional losses he continues to endure. Mr. Weirs will then describe his interactions with Lush Fertilizer and will detail his suspicions of a lurking danger, followed by his realization that Drufo, a vital ingredient used in Lush products, is correlated to his condition, despite the lack of a proper warning label. We will then call Carson Durst to testify to his involvement with Lush Fertilizer. Through his testimony, you will learn how Lush ignored carcinogenic properties of Drufo and how the company chose to not properly test it, despite being warned about its harmful effects. He will tell you how Drufo was Lush's golden goose and the perfect opportunity to turn green into gold. Finally, Dr. Casey Rogers will take the stand and speak about the causal links between Drufo and non-Hodgkin lymphoma, using her expertise to explain a study that Lush neglected to replicate. She will testify to the fact that Lush's label does not provide a sufficient warning about the consequences of working with Drufo, and how Lush, an international corporation, disregarded their responsibility to adequately warn customers. The defense will call Dr. Devin Williams to the stand to claim Drufo's safety by attempting to discredit Dr. Rogers, but Dr. Williams will fail to explain why Lush didn't see fit to replicate Dr. Rogers' study or conduct a new one of their own. Blake Doncourt, the CEO of Lush, will also testify and will aim to coerce you into thinking she is a humanitarian who truly cares about the environment, but will not explain why Lush refuses to eliminate all forms of risk by baking the fertilizer. Blake Doncourt will tell you they want a green future, but won't tell you how that green is really just Lush lining its pockets. The defense will then call upon Skylar Weirs to testify against their own twin and use questionable research to discredit Dakota's pain. We, pursuant to instruction number 1, and as the representatives of the plaintiff, have the burden of proof today and must prove our case by a preponderance of the evidence, which simply means to prove that something is more probably true than not. Pursuant to jury instruction number 2, we must prove this negligence by showing you 4 things. First, that Lush Fertilizer manufactured a chemical product containing Drufo, that they failed to reasonably prevent risk to those using the product in the expected manner, that Dakota Weirs used Drufo in that expected manner, and that Mr. Weirs has damages caused by Drufo, and therefore by the defendant, Lush Fertilizer. The defense will try to convince you that Lush was perfectly responsible in testing and sufficiently warning users, but Mr. Durst will testify to how Lush disregards safety concerns and didn't even bother to research further, despite inconclusive evidence, breaching their duty as a company. Dr. Rogers will explain both the link between non-Hodgkin lymphoma and Drufo, and the duty Lush has to investigate any potential dangers. And finally, Mr. Weirs will express the damages he has incurred due to Lush's negligence and irresponsible conduct. These damages are non-economic and include physical and mental suffering, emotional trauma, and impairment of quality of life. Pursuant to the pretrial ruling of Judge Staub, the amount for these damages will be determined here, and Dakota will testify that these damages are worth $1,000 a day for the estimated lifetime he has lost, 60 more years. This amount totals to $21.9 million. Now, at the culmination of this trial, my co-counsel, Mix Kenny, will ask you to find Lush Fertilizer liable as a result of their negligence through their failure to properly test Drufo, the resulting tragedy of a young musician's existence torn to pieces, and their relentless attempts to turn green grass into a golden opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Team Holly, you have an opening statement.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court?
Proceed.
Speculation versus science. Your Honor, members of the jury, the plaintiff brought fragmented pieces of information. They're trying to put together a puzzle where the pieces simply don't fit. And with this fragmented evidence, they are speculating on the cause of the plaintiff's illness while ignoring the years of science behind the chemical compound Drufo. The plaintiff is speculating that Lush Fertilizer caused his non-Hodgkin lymphoma while ignoring the years of science behind Lush. Lush is coming to you with scientific evidence that proves the exact opposite. While the defense is sorry that the plaintiff is in this situation, Lush Fertilizer is not the company that should be here today. Lush was founded in 2001 by Blake Doncourt, a young woman who simply wanted to make the world a greener and healthier place. She saw what fertilizers were doing to the environment, and she wanted to fix that. So she, along with a team of scientists, came up with a revolutionary product, Drufo. Drufo is a bonding agent that keeps synthetic nitrogen out of the soil, out of the water, and out of you. This is keeping people safe. And today, the defense will prove to you that there is no causal link between Drufo and non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Throughout the course of today's trial, consider the science behind the plaintiff's case, or lack thereof. The plaintiff saw one news story and zeroed in on Lush Fertilizer, while ignoring the years of science behind their products. In contrast, consider the science behind the defense's case. Today, the defense will be calling 3 witnesses: Blake Doncourt, Skylar Weirs, and Dr. Devin Williams. Blake Doncourt is the CEO of Lush Fertilizer, and she will testify to the fact that Lush conducted studies over years to make sure that their product was safe, and that through these studies, non-Hodgkin lymphoma was not identified as a specific risk. She will also testify to the warning labels that are on her product. They're there to keep people safe from all fertilizers, and that these labels aren't just proved by Lush Fertilizer, these labels are approved by the EPA, and that is science. Next, Skylar Weirs, an investigative journalist who has spent time focusing on Drufo. She will testify to her research, which shows Lush Fertilizer is safer than all other products on the market because of Drufo. And she will also testify to her extensive research, which shows there's no link between Drufo and cancer. And that is science. Finally, expert witness Dr. Devin Williams, the lead product and development engineer at Lush Fertilizer. He will testify to the studies that his team has done and how these studies have shown that there is no statistical correlation between Drufo and non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Speculation versus science. Today, the plaintiff has the burden of proof, which they must prove beyond the preponderance of the evidence, which simply means more likely than not. The defense counters with a claim of negligence, a claim against Mr. Weirs, who did not take the proper precautions when using Lush Fertilizer or any of the other fertilizers used. And with the affirmative defense and comparative fault, the defense will show you that Mr. Weirs did not take the proper precautions when using fertilizers, and that this didn't happen just once or twice. This happened over the course of almost 4 years. Lush can't guarantee the safety of other fertilizers, but Lush can guarantee that it was founded to be different, found it to be the safest fertilizer product on the market. So today, the defense asks that you find Lush fertilizer not viable. In addition, the defense asks that you find Mr. Weir's negligent. Thank you.
Thank you. As previewed, at this point, we're going to take a little break while the scoring panelists fill out their scorecards. And panelists, please let me know when you're done.
Your Honor, I'm done scoring.
Your Honor, I'm done, Smart.
Jordan?
Apologies, we're good to move on.
Okay, thank you. Plaintiffs, you may call your first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Mr. Dakota Weirs to the stand. May we proceed?
I'll remind Mr. Weirs that he remains under the oath taken at the beginning of this proceeding. Ms. Taylor, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Weirs. Can you please state and spell your name for the record?
Hi, everyone. My name is Dakota Weirs, and that is spelled W-E-I-R-S.
Could you introduce yourself to the jury?
I'm Dakota. I'm 20 years old. I use he, him pronouns, and today I'm here to expose what Lush Fertilizer did to me.
Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Of course. Well, I used to be very involved in my community. You know, I was a member of the National Honor Society. I was president of my school student government. For work, I was a landscaping technician for Haven Landscaping. And when I had time, I volunteered for the Denver Rescue Mission. I also play I used to play the piano as well.
I notice you say you used to do these things. Why did you stop?
Well, right before I was headed off to Juilliard for piano, I started noticing that I was tired all the time and that my neck started to hurt. And so after all these medical exams and doctor's appointments, I was finally diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma. And ever since then, my life has deteriorated.
What symptoms led to your diagnosis?
Well, the first thing I noticed was this sudden weight loss and this strange swelling around my stomach. And then my neck hurts, my sides hurts, and even my chest hurts as well. It's crippling. And now I can't even sit at the piano anymore without bruising or losing my breath. I can't do what I was meant to do.
You mentioned you were going to Juilliard. Why aren't you attending anymore?
Well, before I was diagnosed, I was very passionate about piano. I worked so hard on it and I was so driven that I received a full ride scholarship to the Juilliard of New York. Everything seemed like it was coming together with my scholarship and my admission, and now I can't even accept it. I can't play in my condition.
I'm sorry for your losses, Mr. Weirs. Let's talk about your work. What did you do for Haven Landscaping?
Well, when I was 14 years old, I started working for this local business called Haven Landscaping. It was just another way to be involved in the community. But when I worked there, I was too young to work with a lot of the complicated machinery. So I mainly found myself on the ground working with seeds and fertilizers. It wasn't bad though. I mean, I love being outside and working with the green grass,
Your Honor.
especially in Colorado.
Narrative.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Although the question response may seem a little lengthy, it is within the scope of a specific question, which is what did you do for Haven Landscaping? Mr. Weirs was listing out these activities. It was not a narrative story or going outside the scope of the question.
Ms. Wu?
I stand by my objection, Your Honor.
All right. It is overruled. Go ahead, Ms. Morgan. Taylor, sorry.
It's all right, Your Honor. Mr. Weirs, would you like to finish what you were saying?
Of course, I was just going to say that I love working with the green grass, especially in Colorado.
Now, what was the atmosphere like at Haven Landscaping?
Working at Haven was a great way to be paid to do something I actually enjoy doing. I remember my boss would usually instruct us to wear certain protective clothing when working with certain chemicals, but sometimes it was just so hot that we just couldn't. I mean, no one really followed those instructions. My boss never really enforced them. But if I had any idea that I could get cancer, I definitely would have covered up.
Now, why didn't you listen to your boss's suggestions to cover up?
Well, no one else was doing it. And, my 14-year-old self was just taking the example of everyone else around me because they didn't seem to think it was a big deal. I didn't know what I was exposing myself to.
Now, how was your overall experience working at Haven Landscaping?
I actually really liked working at Haven. I just wish that I never worked with Lush fertilizer. That's how I know I was exposed to Drufo.
Well, are you sure you used Lush fertilizer?
Yes, I am.
Now, have you seen the Lush fertilizer packaging label?
Yes, when I worked at Haven.
Your Honor, permission for our timekeeper to screen share Exhibit 1 for the witness.
Ready?
Thank you. Timekeeper, if you could please. Thank you. Now, is Exhibit 1 a fair and accurate representation of the Lush packaging you used?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, I move to admit Exhibit 1 into evidence.
Ms. Wu, is there any objection to the admission of Exhibit 1?
No, Your Honor.
Then Exhibit 1 is admitted.
And Your Honor, I ask for Exhibit 1 to be published to the jury.
Granted.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Weirs, what did the Lush packaging you used look like?
Well, on one side, it has an ingredients list, and on the other, it has this recommendation section. But the only caution it gives is that the product could potentially irritate my eyes.
Now, does the packaging seem to have any warnings to you?
No, the word warning is nowhere on the label. There's nothing about long-term effects and certainly nothing about cancer.
Does the packaging mention anything about the long-term effects of Drufo?
No, only that it's an ingredient. There's nothing about long-term effects or what Drufo can cause. There was no warnings about it.
Now, did you ever research the contents of Lush fertilizer?
Yes, I did.
Now, why did you investigate them?
Well, I was watching the news one day and I saw this story about Lush, or more specifically about Drufo, and how the company had leaked documents that...
Your Honor, hearsay?
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
This news story is not being offered to prove the contents of the news story or to prove the truth of the matter asserted. Rather, it is being offered to prompt why Mr. Weirs was investigating the contents of Drufo and what prompted him to start that investigation.
Ms. Wu?
Your Honor, the witness is testifying to what the news story was about, and because the news story does contain specific words that are a part of the plaintiff's case, it would be offered for the truth of the matter asserted.
I respond as well.
I don't think that's necessary. I can instruct and do instruct the jury to disregard the contents of the story and treat the story for the purpose that is offered, which is to explain the chronology of how Mr. Weirs came to start investigating. So overruled. Go ahead, Ms. Taylor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Weirs, would you like me to repeat the question or just continue what you were saying?
I can just repeat, or I can just keep going with my response. Well, as I was saying, from what I could gather from the news story, Lush had lied about its product safety, and I was freaking out because I knew I had used Lush when I worked at Haven, and I didn't remember any warnings about it. And so I was really concerned it was related to my condition. And so from there, I started my investigation.
Now, did you know Lush has Drufo?
I mean, it's on the ingredients list, but I had no idea what it was at the time, and I thought it was safe since there was no warnings about it.
And let's move on to your new life, Mr. Weirs. Is there anything else your diagnosis has restricted?
Everything I used to, I can't anymore. I am not active in my community. My future for college has been ruined. I can't work or do anything, really. My family has been bombarded with these medical bills, and I don't even know if I'll be alive next year. I don't know why this has happened to me. I'm so scared.
Now, is there an aspect of your life you miss most?
Piano. Piano was my life. Ever since I was a kid, I was obsessed with the thing. But when my grandfather died, piano became even more important to me. I remember I would sit at the piano and I would pretend like he was sitting there right beside me, playing with me. It was how I coped.
Now, on the whole, how has your life been changed by non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
My life has been destroyed. My dream of living in New York and being a concert pianist has been completely ruined. And the worst part is I'm sorry. The worst part is that I've lost my connection with Grandpa for good. I can't go to Juilliard and I can't accept my scholarship. And I can't even go outside anymore without seeing the beautiful green landscapes and think about how all this started. My life is over.
So incredibly sorry, Mr. Weirs. How much would you pay to not be in pain today?
Oh, wow, I would give so much.
Mr. Weirs, if you had to give a monetary amount?
Today, at least $1,000, enough to compensate for the pain I have to endure hour after hour.
Will the rest of your life ever be the same?
No, the dreams, the abilities I've lost. No, the rest of my life will never be the same.
Now, what are you going to do moving forward?
I just hope that through this experience, I can save someone from this fate. Flush needs to be held responsible for what they've done. Hopefully something good can come from all this.
Thank you, Mr. Weirs. I have no further questions for this witness at this time, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Ms. Wu. You have cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Weirs.
Good afternoon.
On behalf of the entire defense team, we would like to express our sympathies for the situation you're in.
Thank you.
Now, isn't it true you worked at Haven Landscaping?
Yes, I did.
And you worked there for 4 years, correct?
About, yes.
You're responsible for spreading seed and fertilizer, correct?
Yes, I was too young to work with a lot of the other stuff, so yes.
And over the course of your time with Haven, you used several different types of fertilizers, correct?
Yes, that is true.
Isn't it true you also use several different types of lawn chemicals?
Yes, that is also true.
And these were from several different manufacturers, right?
Yes.
Now let's talk about the instructions your boss told you to always take. Your boss instructed you to always cover your face when using fertilizers, correct?
With certain chemicals and fertilizers, yes.
But you didn't follow that, did you?
Not all the time, but for certain products, there was no warnings about it. So I had no idea I could end up like this.
Right, you didn't always follow the instruction to cover your face, correct?
Not all the time, no.
You were told to always wear long sleeves, correct?
With certain chemicals, yes.
And you didn't follow that, did you?
Sometimes I didn't follow that, yes.
You were told to always wear pants, correct?
Yes, once again, with certain chemicals.
And you didn't follow that, did you?
Sometimes.
You were told to always wear gloves, correct?
Yes, with certain chemicals.
And you didn't follow that, did you?
Sometimes, yes.
So you didn't follow all of these instructions your boss told you to always take, correct?
He told me to take them with certain chemicals, yes, but no, sometimes I did not follow those instructions.
Even though he told you to always follow them, correct?
With certain chemicals, yes.
And the reason why I didn't follow these is because it was too hot, correct?
Part because it was too hot, and my 14-year-old self just took the example of my coworkers around me as well.
Yes, however, part of the reason was because it was too hot, right?
Yes.
Now let's look at Lush Fertilizer's label. There was a label on the fertilizer of Lush, correct?
Yes, there is.
And you had your boss at Haven Landscaping send you a copy of it, right?
Yes, I did.
Your Honor, permission for co-counsel to screen share what has been previously entered as Exhibit 1.
Granted.
Now let's take a look at Exhibit 1. Now, at the top, do you see the word hazard?
Yes, I do.
And it's followed by keep out of reach of children, correct?
Yes, I do see that.
Do you see the word caution?
Yes, I do.
And it's followed by causes eye irritation, correct?
Yes, I do.
And so all of these taken together did not equate to a warning for you, is that right?
The label doesn't warn me that that I could end up like this, that I could get
Here's
on.
the question that I asked. All of these taken together do not equate to any kind of warning to you, correct?
No, they do not.
Right, and now direct your attention to the bottom right. Do you see the words user safety recommendations?
Objection, Your Honor. This is cumulative evidence.
Ms. Wu?
Your Honor, this would not be cumulative as I am directing the witness to specific words and lines within the exhibit and asking questions based off of those lines.
Ms. Taylor?
Your Honor, she is both directing attention and then confirming that the witness has read it out. She's welcome to just ask questions about the evidence that has already been admitted. Otherwise, it is cumulative to ask him to read it out once again.
Well, it's cross-examination, and I think it's fair game for her to ask the witness about specific portions of the exhibit. So this is overruled. Ms. Wu, go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, to reiterate, do you see the words user safety recommendations?
Yes, I do.
And the recommendations instruct users to wear protective clothing, correct?
They recommend so, yes.
And they also recommend users to wear an N95 mask, correct?
Yes, they do recommend that as well.
And so you didn't follow any of these recommendations, did you?
I didn't follow any of these recommendations because I didn't know what would happen if I didn't.
Right. However, you didn't follow these recommendations, correct?
No, I did not follow these instructions sometimes.
And these are the same ones that your boss told you to always follow, correct?
With certain chemicals, yes.
Your Honor, co-counsel may stop screen sharing. Now let's talk about how you used other fertilizers. Over the course of your time, you're exposed to numerous fertilizers, correct?
I use a multitude of fertilizers. Yes, that's correct.
And these fertilizers, they all came with their own safety precautions. Isn't that right?
Yes, some actually told us that we couldn't use them indoors or that eye and face coverings were necessary.
Right. However, you didn't follow any of those precautions, did you?
Sometimes I didn't follow those instructions. Yes, that's correct.
Correct. You didn't follow the instruction to wear a face covering, correct?
Not all.
Objection, Your Honor. Asked and answered.
Ms. Wu?
Your Honor, this is not asked and answered as this pertains to the safety precautions on the other fertilizers, not what her boss told her to take or the safety recommendations on the Lush label.
I think that's correct. Overruled.
So you didn't follow the instruction to wear a face covering, correct?
Sometimes I neglected that precaution.
You didn't follow the precaution to wear, to cover your eyes, correct?
Sometimes.
You didn't follow the precaution to use the product indoors, correct?
Usually with certain fertilizers, they would have that warning, but sometimes we used them.
Yes, however, these labels and these precautions, they never changed, did they?
I don't believe so, no.
So you didn't follow the instructions your boss told you to take, correct?
Sometimes, yes.
You didn't follow the instructions on the Lush label, correct?
I didn't follow those instructions because I didn't know that I could.
That was not the question that I asked. You didn't follow the instructions on the Lush label, correct?
I didn't know I had to. There was no warning to do so.
However, you didn't follow the explicit user safety recommendations on the Lush label, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. Asked and answered.
Well, at this point, they seem to be in a bit of banter, so that's overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So you didn't follow the explicit user safety recommendations on the Lush label either, correct?
I didn't follow those instructions or those recommendations, yes.
You didn't follow the safety precautions on the other fertilizers you used, correct?
Sometimes, yes.
And you have no idea what is in those other fertilizers, do you?
I don't know the whole, all the components of those ingredients or those products, no.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Ms. Taylor, do you have any redirect within the scope of the cross?
Yes, Your Honor, and a brief one, if you may.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Weirs, why didn't you follow the recommendations on the Lush label?
No one else around me was doing it. I was 14. I didn't know that my life would end so soon if I didn't follow those.
Does the Lush label give you warnings?
No, it recommends that I do something. It doesn't tell me that that my life is in danger if I don't do so. There's no warnings on the label.
Thank you, Mr. Weirs. I have no further questions for this witness at this time, Your Honor.
Thank you. Then the witness is excused.
This is Mark. I'm done.
Your Honor, my scoring is complete.
Your Honor, my scoring is complete.
All right, thank you. Team Darrell, you may call your next witness.
Your Honor, plaintiff calls Carson Durst to the stand.
All right, the witness is instructed and reminded that they remain under the oath taken at the beginning of this proceeding.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Good afternoon. Could you please state and spell your name for the record?
Hello, my name is Carson Durst. That's Durst.
What's your profession?
Right now, I'm the lead product developer for Terrace Greenery.
Where did you start your career in fertilizer?
I started my career at Lush Fertilizer as an intern way back in 2003. I rose quickly through the ranks and became a product development engineer after just 3 months working there.
How were you chosen for this internship?
The CEO of Lush, Blake Doncourt, pulled some strings to get me a job.
Why did he pull strings for you?
Well, my best friend going.
Objection, Your Honor. Question calls for speculation.
Ms. Walter?
Your Honor, if I may, this question will be laying foundation as to the relationship between Carson Durst and Blake Doncourt, which he will testify was a very close one, and therefore it is within his rationally based perception pursuant to Rule 701 as to why a close friend of his would do this.
Response, Your Honor.
Ms. McDermott?
Your Honor, as that foundation for that relationship has not been laid yet, the witness cannot testify to why Blake Doncourt pulled some strings for him, as the jury does not know about that relationship quite yet.
Ms. Walter?
I can ask a foundational question, if you would.
I think that'd be a good idea. Go ahead.
Mr. Durst, can you explain what your relationship was with Blake Doncourt growing up?
Well, she was like family to me. Her son, Charles Doncourt, was my best friend growing up. And then I went to Arizona State University with Charles, where I got my bachelor's degree in chemical engineering.
And so why did Blake Doncourt pull strings for you to get this internship?
Well, I was having a bit of trouble finding a job approaching graduation. I talked to Charles about it, and he said that Lush was offering internships and that Blake could help me get a job there.
What were you working on when you started as an intern at Lush?
Well, my first big project with Lush was helping to test the safety of a chemical in Lush fertilizer called Drufo.
And what were your specific responsibilities with regards to that study?
I was tasked with researching one of the chemical compounds that comprises Drufo.
What did this research consist of?
Well, it consisted mostly of research, but I did find one research article published from a group in England about the carcinogenic nature of the chemical compound that I was tasked with researching.
Your Honor, permission for our timer to screen share what has been marked as Exhibit 3.
Granted.
Mr. Durst, do you recognize this document?
Yes, it's the study that I found as part of my research.
Is this a fair and accurate representation of that study?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, I move to admit Exhibit 3 into evidence.
Is there an objection to the admission of Exhibit 3 into evidence?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense objects on the grounds of hearsay.
Response, Your Honor.
Yes.
Your Honor, this is not hearsay because it is not being offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted that Drufo or the chemical compound is carcinogenic in rats. we are offering this evidence to prove that Carson Durst found a study, regardless of the contents of that study, and that Jerry Langley and Carson Durst's other superiors were notified of that study, as well as to prove the present sense impression of this study on Mr. Durst.
Well, isn't the content of the study relevant to why he thinks it's important, or why he brought it to his superior's attention? And doesn't
Yes.
that mean that the truth of it is in play?
The effect that the study had on Mr. Durst is why he brought it to his superiors.
And that's based on the contents of it. Isn't that correct?
Yeah.
So how is it not being presented for the truth of the matter?
We are not admitting the contents of the study, but rather what Mr. Durst's reaction was to the study.
Then why does the exhibit come in? Because that's the contents of the study.
We're not going to go into the specifics of what he found in the study, but rather why he felt it was important to bring it to his superiors.
Okay, Ms. McDermott?
Your Honor, as the contents of this study were a part of what Mr. Durst felt he needed to express to his superiors, this makes it for the truth of the matter asserted, and it makes it for the truth of the matter asserted, Your Honor.
Okay, I see that the defense objection has some weight. It seems, however, that the purpose of the plaintiff one of the purposes that the plaintiff is trying to introduce this exhibit is to show that the witness's superiors had notice of a problem with the Gruffo material. So while it's a close matter, I'm going to overrule the objection and admit the exhibit 3.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Durst, what were your personal takeaways from the study?
Well, the study concludes that the compound might be carcinogenic in rats, but I could not find any studies as a part of my research that explored the harmful effects of the chemical compound in humans.
And what did you do once you found this study?
I documented it and put it in my lab notebook, which I then gave to my superior, Jerry Langley, as we were all supposed to do as part of the study.
And what happened to this notebook?
Well, supposedly Jerry Langley reviewed it and compiled that along with all the other information into a study that was sent to upper management in Lush.
Thank you. Let's talk about your time at Lush after your internship. Did you take part in any other studies with Lush?
Yes, I did. Right after my promotion in September of 2003, I was invited by Jerry to help conduct a second study about the safety of Drufo.
And how did you join the study?
As I said, Jerry invited me, but it was via email.
And did you keep this email?
Yes, I did.
Your Honor, permission for our timekeeper to screen share what has been marked as Exhibit 4.
Granted.
Do you recognize this document?
Yes, that's the email that Jerry sent me in September of 2003.
Is this a fair and accurate representation of that email?
Yes, it is.
As far as you're aware, were these emails sent in the course of a regularly conducted business activity?
Yes, they were.
Your Honor, I move to admit Exhibit 4 into evidence.
Is there an objection to the admission of Exhibit 4 to evidence?
No objection at this time, Your Honor, as this email would be proved fraudulent in my cross, so the defense has no objections.
All right, then Exhibit 4 is admitted.
Mr. Durst, what did you see in this email?
Well, primarily it says that this second study will be based on things that came up in the first study about the potential carcinogenic nature in Drufo, this time specifically studying it in humans. It also states that me and all the other product development engineers should meet with senior management to be briefed on target market positions and economic strategies planned for Drufo.
And what was your
If I may interrupt for just a minute, just so that there's no ambiguity, the scoring panelists, since the exhibits 3 and 4 have been admitted into evidence, may review those exhibits. Thank you. Ms. Walter, go ahead.
Mr. Durst, what was your understanding of this email?
Well, to me, that part about target market positions and economic strategies seemed to imply that we should be presenting our results and analysis, in a positive light to promote the financial success of Trufo. This was also made clear later in our weekly meetings.
And what did you do with your analysis once you finished the study?
Once we had all reached our conclusions, we had one final meeting to present our analysis to my boss, Jer, and an upper echelon manager named Alex Monroe.
What happened at this final meeting?
Well, as I said, all of us presented our research and findings, but the one that I found most interesting was that one scientist expressed concern that not only may Trufo contain a carcinogen.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Response, Your Honor.
Ms. Walter?
Your Honor, pursuant to Rule 801 D2D, this statement is not hearsay, as it was made by an employee of Lush on a matter within the scope of that employment and while it existed.
Ms. McDermott?
Your Honor, I stand by my objection.
Okay. I think that the statement is admissible as an exception to the hearsay rule, and therefore the objection is overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
What happened at this final meeting?
Well, a lot happened. We presented all of our findings, but the one that I found most important was that one scientist expressed concern that not only may Trufo contain a carcinogen, but that her analysis found that it may also be linked to non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
And how did Alex and Jerry react?
Well, at the end of the meeting, Alex Monroe told all of us to keep everything we had heard in the walls until they figured out what they were going to do.
And after this meeting, what happened to the study?
Well, it wasn't published to the public because it was an in-house study, but it was reviewed by Jerry and upper management and then formatted into a report to be distributed to all the higher level employees at Lush.
And did you see the final study?
Yes, I read the report about a month after it came out.
What did you see in the study?
The primary conclusion of the study was that further analysis was required in order to determine if Trufo had any long-term health effects like cancer.
And what did the study suggest Lush do about this potential risk?
Its primary suggestion was that Trufo should be baked in order to completely eliminate the possibility that it could be considered carcinogenic.
And what did Lush do with this information?
Lush did nothing. The study, which was conducted by Lush, seemed to frame baking Trufo as above what was necessary, which did comply with what senior management seemed to want in the meetings that we had.
And what was your interpretation of the report, having participated in the study?
From participating in the study, this was a way for Lush to protect their shiny do-gooder image. The study seemed misleading, and they left out information that I found extremely valuable from our weekly meetings. For example, the non-Hodgkin lymphoma link to Trufo was never specifically addressed in the report, despite being a key part of the final meeting that we had. I felt that it was a deliberate attempt to fit the narrative desired by management.
Objection, Your Honor, improper lay opinion.
Walter?
Your Honor, as Mr. Durst has testified that he was an employee who was participating in this study, it is not improper lay opinion for him to testify to what he interpreted this report being and what he felt its aim was.
Well, as a participant in the study, he can testify as to his opinion about the study. How does that give him an opportunity to opine as to the motives and the tactics of his superiors?
Your Honor, Mr. Durst, as he testified, that he was in constant contact with his supervisor, Jerry, and they were briefed regularly in staff meetings as to marketing goals and things like that. Mr. Durst would have an understanding of what upper management wanted him to do and wanted the study to.
Well, is there a statement to that effect? I mean, a statement by one of his superiors would be admissible under exceptions to the hearsay rule or not hearsay at all, and would be not require his opinion as to what he was being told, but would be an admission.
We don't have, well, the statement that he had testified to earlier was that he was told to keep the report that they found within the walls, which would suggest sort of the narrative that upper management wanted staff to illustrate with this.
Well, it could suggest a number of things, and anything beyond the statement that keep it within the walls is argumentative, isn't it?
I would just say that the testimony Mr. Durst is offering is what he felt based on that statement and based on his interactions with superiors that he felt upper management wanted him to do. He's not testifying to absolutely what upper management wanted him to do, but just what he felt from his time around them.
Ms. McDermott, do you have anything else to add to this?
Your Honor, because Mr. Durst is a lay witness, what he felt in this case is giving an opinion, and because he is a lay witness, he cannot give this type of opinion in this case.
Well, I think Ms. Walter, he's testified to what you want him to testify, and going any further than that is really beyond what he has observed. So I'm going to sustain the objection.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Durst, what ended your career with Lush?
Well, it had happened throughout my time at Lush, but starting in 2005, my coworkers started filing mass amounts of complaints that I didn't deserve the promotions I was getting, which is wildly unfounded, and I frankly don't understand why. I think it must have been because of my relationship with Blake, but I can't know for sure.
And was there any specific instance which ended your employment with Lush?
Yes, I brought it up with Blake, and the second time he told me to deal with it myself, which that was what really ended my career with Lush.
And why is that?
Well, I felt betrayed. She was like family to me, and the fact that she didn't defend me, it hurt a lot. I realized that I did not have a future with Lush and immediately went looking for other jobs.
And why did you decide to go work for Terrace Greenery?
Well, the main reason was because they were hiring when I started looking. I knew it would get Blake's goat, and I felt extremely conflicted when I started looking there because of my relationship with Blake, but I had to look out for myself now, and I felt that the best way that I could do that was going to work for Terrace Greenery.
Thank you, Mr. Durst. Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions for this witness at this time.
All right, thank you. Ms. McDermott, do you have cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening, Mr. Durst. You started working off at Lush Fertilizer as an intern, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And during your time at Lush, you were in charge of researching the safety of Drufo, correct?
Yes.
And your job is to report these safety concerns?
My job was to give them to Jerry Langley, my superior, and it was her job to compile them into a report along with all the other information received from product development engineers like myself and give that to all of the upper echelon managers, including Blake at Lush.
Thank you, Mr. Durst. In the future, could you please restrict your answers to a yes or no? I have limited time on cross, and your attorney will have time to have you answer these questions on redirect. Now, during your time, you only found one study with the potential carcinogenic effects of Drufo, isn't that correct?
Yes, during the first study, I only found one.
And this was conducted on rats, correct?
Yes, it was.
And you found the study in 2003?
Yes, which was while Lush was testing Drufo.
Yes. And it's now 2022, and you are coming to us today with no other studies about the potential carcinogenic properties of Drufo. Isn't that correct?
Well, I left Lush in 2006, and it hasn't been my job to research it since then.
Yes, that's correct. You left Lush in 2006. And are you aware of what is going on in the company right now?
Not entirely, no.
So you have no knowledge of how Lush has changed since you've left?
No, I do not.
Thank you. Let's move on to the email that you claim to have received from Lush Fertilizer. You claim to have received this email on September 18th, 2003, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you told no one about this email?
I mean, it was given to me and all the other product development engineers. No one else really needed to know at that time, considering it was only pertinent to us.
Yes, but you are the only one here testifying today to the validity of this email. Isn't that correct?
Well, no one else who received it is here testifying, so yes.
Even though there are 17 other people on the recipient list, including Blake Doncourt. Isn't that
Yes.
correct?
Yes, that's true.
Now, finally, let's move on to your transition to Terrace Greenery. You left Lush because you were feeling marginalized, correct?
Well, I didn't feel like my work was being appreciated, and the thing that really finished it was my conversation with Blake.
Right, your conversation with Blake, where he told you to deal with it by yourself. Isn't that correct?
Yes, that's true.
And this made you mad, correct?
I was seething afterwards, and I felt very betrayed.
Yes. And so you decided to apply for Terrace Greenery to get Blake's goat, didn't you?
I knew it would get Blake's goat, and I actually felt very conflicted by the fact that I had such a strong relationship with Blake, but I knew I had to look out for myself, and that's really why I applied.
And you work for Terrace Greenery today, correct?
Yes.
And if one of Lush's products were to be seen carcinogenic, this would significantly increase
Objection,
Terrace Greenery's-
also speculation.
Ms. McDermott?
Your Honor, as the witness works for Terrace Greenery and would be aware of how their profits are going, whether or not Lush Fertilizers, one of their products being found to be carcinogenic would affect Terrace Greenery sales, Mr. Durst would know about that.
Ms. Walter?
Your Honor, Mr. Durst cannot testify to a hypothetical situation and how that would affect the profits at Terrace Greenery. He would not know exactly how, if a carcinogenic effect were to be found in Lush, he cannot testify to exactly how that would affect the profits at Terrace.
Well, I didn't hear the question to ask for a dollar and cents effect. It was a general effect of one competitor's improved or reduced viability in the market. So why is that unfair?
I would still say that Mr. Durst cannot testify to a hypothetical situation and to how a product or the profits, regardless of whether they'd go up or down, he can't testify to what that behavior would look like in a hypothetical situation.
I overruled. Go ahead.
Mr. Durst, do you need me to re-ask the question?
Yes, please.
If Lush Fertilizers products were found to be carcinogenic, would that not impact Terrace Greenery's profits?
I would assume it could, yes.
Yes, and you are testifying against Lush Fertilizer today, isn't that correct?
Yes, that's true.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
All right, thank you. Ms. Walter, do you have any redirect within the scope of the cross-examination?
No redirect, Your Honor.
And thank you, then the witness is excused.
Your Honor, I've completed my scoring.
Your Honor, my scoring is complete.
My scoring complete, Your Honor. Mark.
Thank you. Plaintiff, you may call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Dr. Casey Rogers to the stand.
Dr. Rogers, I remind you, you remain under the oath you took at the beginning of this session.
Yes, Your Honor.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Good afternoon, Dr. Rogers.
Good afternoon.
Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Of course. Hello. My name is Dr. Casey Rogers. That's Rogers, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm a professor over at UC Berkeley in the Horticulture and Entomology Department. And I know, plants and bugs sounds super boring, but I promise you it's a lot more interesting than it sounds.
And what else do you do when you're not teaching?
Well, when I'm not taking care of my beetles, Ringo, Jimothy, Timothy, the big one, and Vanessa, I'm usually conducting my own research, specifically in the field of toxicology relating to fertilizers and pesticides. I actually currently work over at the Environmental Chemistry and Toxicology Laboratory.
And would you tell us more specifically about the research that you've conducted?
Well, I've actually been publishing work since 2003 in multiple topics, but all within the field of horticulture. But I focused most of my time studying Drufo, both in relation to the plants it's used on, as well as the people who use it.
So Dr. Rogers, it sounds like you've had a lot of very interesting stuff on your plate. Would you just tell us how you made it to this point in your career?
Of course. Well, I started out by getting my bachelor's of science in agriculture and chemistry from CSU. And after I graduated, I began work as a research analyst until I got my PhD from UC Berkeley in agriculture and entomology.
And would you tell us just a little bit more about what you did as a research analyst?
I can't actually tell you where I worked, but what I can tell you is that I worked for several chemical industry clients, helping them to synthesize, summarize, and analyze data for their businesses. I did this through both conducting my own research as well as putting all this data together into written products.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. Your Honor, I now move to tender Dr. Casey Rogers in the fields of horticulture, toxicology, and research analysis.
All right. Is there an objection to the acceptance of Dr. Rogers as an expert in the fields of horticulture, toxicology, and research analysis?
Your Honor, permission to perform a brief voir dire before any objection is made.
Go ahead.
Your Honor, before I proceed, may I have a brief time check?
Yes, you may.
Your Honor, the defense has 10 minutes and 2 seconds remaining.
Good afternoon, Dr. Rogers.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. No, you do not have a degree in the field of medicine, correct?
No, not medicine.
And you have not had any training in the field of medicine, have you?
No, not medicine specifically.
And you have not worked in the medical field?
No, again, that's not the kind of doctorate I have.
Now, Dr. Rogers, you've had no sort of training that would allow you to establish a medical link between a chemical, correct?
I do study toxicology very deeply, which is how chemicals affect the body. But after that, not really. Like after what the chemicals do, that's not my field.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. Your Honor, the defense has no objection to the witness being able to testify as an expert in horticulture, toxicology, or research analysis. However, the defense requests that they are not allowed to testify in any sort of medical diagnoses based off of chemicals, seeing as how they have no degrees, training, or education or work experience within that field.
Ms. Kenny?
Your Honor, I would agree that Dr. Rogers would not be tendered in any field of medicine, but I would say that toxicology, as Dr. Rogers has explained, is the connection between chemicals in the body and what chemicals do to the body. So while I would completely agree with opposing counsel that in no way should Dr. Rogers opine as to any of the intricacies of a medical condition, the entire study of toxicology is the link between chemicals in the body. So I do believe it is important that Dr. Rogers be allowed to testify between the causal link of chemicals and the body, but go no further than that.
Okay, I'm going to accept Dr. Rogers as an expert in the fields of horticulture, toxicology, and research analysis. The question as to her competence to testify on medical matters is something that I'm not prepared to rule on as a matter of forecast, and we'll have to take that up in situ when the questions are asked. So go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, moving forward, Dr. Rogers, we both know that Drufo plays a central role in this case today. Would you explain to the jury just what Drufo is?
Of course, I would love to. So essentially, Drufo is a compound made of potassium, phosphorus, and nitrogen that works as a sort of preservative to keep fertilizer intact for longer periods of time.
And when did you first hear about Drufo?
I think I first heard about Drufo back around 2003 when it was first being developed by Lush, but it really caught my attention when it was first released to the public because it seemed to me that it was, rushed to market.
And so if you first heard about Drufo in 2003, why are you still studying it today?
Well, objection, Your Honor. relevance?
Ms. Kenny?
A relevance to why I would ask that opposing counsel clarify what they don't find relevant, why Dr. Rogers is studying Drufo.
Your
Ms.
Honor,
Caniglio?
Your Honor, the thing that is not relevant in today's case is why Dr. Rogers has still continued to study Drufo.
Oh, may I respond, Your
Ms.
Honor?
Kenny, go ahead.
Drufo is incredibly relevant to this case, as the whole case relies on whether or not Drufo caused the non-Hodgkin lymphoma of Mr. Dakota Weirs. Dr. Casey Rogers has studied Drufo, and the reason that Dr. Casey Rogers has studied Drufo is incredibly relevant to this case, because if she hadn't needed to study Drufo, then there would be no reason for us all to be here today.
Well, I think that the question of why Dr. Rogers has continued to study Drufo is certainly relevant to her opinion and to how she arrives at her opinion and what those opinions consist of. And so therefore, I'm going to overrule the objection. Go ahead, Ms. Kenny.
Yes, Your Honor. Would you continue explaining why you study Drufo?
Of course. Well, in the following years, after I had first heard about Drufo, I had heard numerous reports of the potentially negative effects of Drufo. And I also had heard reports that it was shown to be potentially carcinogenic in rats. And I understand the potential environmental benefits of Drufo, I do. But it still troubled me that I never really saw the human safety aspect of Drufo studied or looked into further by Lush. So that's actually what prompted me to conduct my own further studies of the safety of Drufo.
And Dr. Rogers, just getting into it more specifically, will you tell us about this study you conducted?
Of course. Well, the purpose of this study, or not the purpose, sorry, I used 3 groups over the course of years to, find how, if there was a link between level of exposure to Drufo and then the development of serious medical diseases, like, not medical diseases, serious diseases like cancers, including non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
And would you tell us some more about these groups of people?
Of course. Well, like I said, I observed 3 groups of people, each with different levels of exposure to Drufo. The first with no exposure to Drufo, the second with a moderate exposure to Drufo, and the third with a high level of exposure to Drufo. And those who were exposed to Drufo included people like gardeners and farm laborers. And I followed these groups during their exposure and then the years after and monitored them for various health conditions.
And after examining these groups, what did the study conclude?
Well, the study actually found an increase of serious health conditions in those who were exposed to Drufo. More specifically, that those with prolonged exposure were 10 times more likely.
Objection, Your Honor. Outside the scope of the witness's expertise.
May I respond?
Could you explain that a little more, please?
Yes, Your Honor. The witness is attempting to testify about whether or not exposure to Drufo makes somebody 10 times more likely to get a specific disease. This would fall within the causal link between a medical condition, a serious medical condition, and a chemical. And seeing as how she has no expertise in the field of medicine, this is outside the scope of her expertise.
Ms. Kenny?
Your Honor, once again, we have laid the foundation that Dr. Casey Rogers is tenured in the field of toxicology. And as Dr. Rogers has explained, the field of toxicology relates chemicals and toxins to the body. Yes, Dr. Rogers is not tenured in the field of medicine, so cannot explain the intricacies of any cancer, but the entire field of toxicology is explaining how chemicals affect the body. That includes diagnoses such as non-Hodgkin lymphoma. And so I believe Dr. Rogers is fully within her expertise to explain simply the causal link between the toxin and the lymphoma without overstepping into the specifics of the lymphoma itself.
Yeah, I perhaps was not following as well as I should, but it seemed to me that Dr. Rogers was explaining the results of her study.
She was
And
explaining the
they're
results.
merely facts of one group compared to another, and how that exceeds, how that's even an opinion at this point is not clear. So I'm going to overrule the objection.
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Rogers, would you just continue that explanation?
Of course. So as I was saying, the group with prolonged exposure to Drufo was found to be 10 times more likely to develop cancers including non-Hodgkin lymphoma than those with no exposure to Drufo, and 5 times more likely to develop cancers, including non-Hodgkin lymphoma, as those with only occasional exposure to Drufo.
And Dr. Rogers, I'm still confused about one thing. It's just that all the people in this study had lives aside from their work. I mean, couldn't something other than Drufo have caused the cancer?
Well, actually, the variation in the lives of the subjects, aside from their work, is very important to the validity of this study. Of course, there's a very minimal chance that something other than Drufo caused cancer in one of the subjects. But the fact that the only common link between each of these subjects was exposure to Drufo, and the numbers fell the way they did, points to Drufo being the only common link between them. So I think it's very plausible that their non-Hodgkin lymphoma was caused by Drufo.
And Dr. Rogers, did you look at any preventative measures against Drufo?
Yes, we did, actually. We found that in order to reduce the risk of absorbing Drufo through the skin, people working with Drufo should wear long sleeves and long pants. And to avoid inhaling Drufo, workers should wear medical grade face masks that cover both the nose and mouth, similar to an N95 mask. But I would like to say that this part of my study was found to be inconclusive, as many workers are not given access to this protective equipment like masks. So it's really hard to tell if even this level of protection is sufficient enough to protect against Drufo.
And did you see the label brought up earlier in court today?
Yes, I did, and I'd actually love to talk about that.
Would you just tell us briefly about how this label pertains to the preventative measures you studied?
Well, yes, the label I would like to first point out is just a general recommendation label for fertilizer, not specifically for Drufo. So of course it recommends long sleeves and a face mask, but it only recommends this. It's not an explicit requirement. So it also doesn't anywhere say that Drufo is potentially carcinogenic. So it does not stress nearly enough how important it is to cover up.
And Dr. Rogers, did you review Dakota Weirs' case for today?
Yes, I did.
And what, if any, opinions do you have about Dakota Weirs' lymphoma?
Well, after looking at both Mr. Weirs' medical and employment records, I think that I found that his level of exposure to Drufo was very similar to those in my study who had prolonged exposure to Drufo. So I think there is a high degree of probability that his non-Hodgkin lymphoma was caused by exposure to Drufo.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
Your Honor, you were muted and I was unable to hear what you said.
I'm sorry. Go ahead with your cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Rogers, this is the first time you yourself are testifying in court as an expert, correct?
Yes, it is actually, but my work has been used in litigation before, so I'm not totally new to this whole process.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. And you are getting paid as an expert to be here, correct?
As far as I'm aware, that's the pretty standard procedure as an expert, so yes.
And you hope to come back to court to testify as an expert in future cases, correct?
Yes, I feel a certain responsibility towards people who are in.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers.
So yes.
I heard a yes. Let's move on to your study. Now, isn't it true that you had 3 groups within your study?
Yes, I did.
One of those groups was people who were never exposed to Drufo?
Yes.
Another one of those groups were people who were only sometimes exposed to Drufo?
Yes, that's correct.
And your third group were people who were often exposed to Drufo, correct?
Yes, that is also correct.
Now, isn't it true that that third group with high levels of exposure to Drufo were people like gardeners and people who worked for landscaping companies?
Yes, that is true.
So they would have also used other fertilizers, correct?
That is possible, but I was only selecting people based off of whether or not they use products with Drufo. So that was the only common link between them all. It is possible, I guess, that they used other fertilizers.
But Dr. Rogers, you did not monitor whether or not they used other fertilizers, correct?
No, the point of my study was to find how Drufo specifically affected people.
Dr. Rogers, that was not my question. My question was if you monitored with those participants who used other fertilizers, not the point of your study.
No, because like I said, the point of my
Thank
study
you, Doctor.
was not other fertilizers.
Now, Dr. Rogers, you would agree that there's a significant risk with other agriculture products, correct?
Yes. And any fertilizer or pesticide can be potentially toxic.
And as a research analyst, you would follow the scientific method, correct?
Yes, as any proper scientist should.
And a part of that scientific method was having control of variables that would alter your results, correct?
Like a control group? Yes, I had a group that wasn't exposed to DRUFO at all, if that's what you're asking.
That is not what I'm asking, Dr. Rogers. I'm asking if a part of the scientific method is having control over all of the variables that would affect your results.
Yes, in science, there's an independent and dependent variable. In this instance, my independent variable was DRUFO exposure.
So, Dr. Rogers, despite the fact that knowing as a scientist you should have control over all the variables that affect your results, and knowing that there is significant concern with other agriculture products, you did not monitor the other agriculture products that your participants were exposed to, correct?
Yes, because what I was looking at was their exposure.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. I heard a yes. Now, I would like to go back over the results of your study. You said that some ways to mitigate the exposure to DRUFO would be wear long sleeves.
Yeah, long sleeves as well as a face mask.
Now, Dr. Rogers, you heard Dakota Weir's testimony today, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And you heard him testify to not following these procedures, correct?
Yes, that's what I believe he said.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
All right, thank you. Ms. Kennedy, do you have any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor.
Then the witness is excused.
Your Honor, this is Mark. I'm done scoring.
I've completed scoring as well, Your Honor.
As have I, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Does the plaintiff have any other witnesses?
No, Your Honor, the plaintiff rests.
All right, thank you. Defense, you may call your first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. Before the defense proceeds, we would like to confirm that exhibits 1, 3, and 4 have been entered by the plaintiff.
That is correct.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, may I proceed?
Yes, you may.
Good afternoon, Ms. Doncourt.
Good afternoon.
Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Hello, my name is Blake Doncourt. I am the CEO and founder of Lush Fertilizer.
What is Lush Fertilizer?
Lush develops and produces yard and commercial fertilizers while also aiming to mitigate the common negative effects that come with agricultural products.
Why was the company founded?
I've always loved nature, and so when I started growing up and I noticed the oceans being polluted and coral reefs dying, trees catching fire, I wanted to find a way to somehow make the world a healthier and greener place and mitigate those effects.
How so?
Well, it started with our product itself, and then we also went further to donate to charities, which are helping to decrease the nitrogen footprint. We also started our own charity, which helps to clean up the most polluted parts of the ocean. And we also work with state and national legislature to implement education on the climate situation.
Has your company been recognized for those efforts?
Yes, we've been honored to be awarded the SEAL Business Sustainability Award, and I was also personally recognized for the UN Champions of the Earth Award.
So why are you here today?
I'm here to show that my company has never and would never do anything to put others at risk.
First, let's talk about your fertilizer. Is your fertilizer different than other fertilizers on the market?
Yes, our fertilizer is more environmentally friendly and more friendly to those who use it.
How so?
Well, it contains an ingredient called DRUFO, which acts as a bonding agent in our fertilizer.
What does DRUFO do?
So DRUFO, when used with the fertilizer, is a bonding agent. So that means it sticks onto the grass that it's applied onto and causes less runoff when water or anything comes along.
Why is that important?
It's important because when that nitrogen and dangerous chemicals run off of the plant, it gets into the soil, into the water, and into the people, which can cause negative health effects for the people and bad effects for the environment.
How long did it take to develop Truffaut?
Well, we began development about 2 decades ago, and we've been refining the product ever since.
Does your company conduct studies on Truffaut?
Yes, in fact, we have our own toxicology research and development team specifically for that purpose.
So why are these studies conducted?
The studies are conducted to make sure that the product is safe, first and foremost. I also like to make sure that I know everything about my product and all the effects it's having on different variables.
Does your company still conduct these studies?
Yes, we continue to conduct studies to look at the science and refine our product.
So when you review these studies, what did you learn from them?
All studies that I received led to the same conclusion, which is that Truffaut, when used in our fertilizer, significantly increases the
Objection,
safety.
Your Honor. Hearsay.
Any response, Ms. Wu?
Your Honor, this is not by definition hearsay as, pardon me, Your Honor. Your Honor, this would be an exception to hearsay because this would be, because the studies are a regularly conducted business activity.
Ms. Taylor?
Your Honor, the studies were not regularly conducted. The research that was compiled for these studies was quite significant. The study itself, as published as a report, is a content that is not regularly conducted in business. The research is regularly conducted, but the study is merely the result of that research. It is not the regularly conducted business activity.
How do you distinguish between her testimony that they, on a regular basis, study the effects of the contents and as part of their ongoing business?
So the distinction I'm making is the verb study and the noun study. Her research team might study the effects of Truffaut on a day-to-day business, but the actual reports that they are publishing are not a regularly conducted business activity. They happened quite infrequently, and Lush only published a few.
So you're thinking that they finance these ongoing studies for no particular purpose, that if they reach a conclusion from the study and report it to their superiors, that's not part of the business?
No, Your Honor. They are, in fact, creating a report, and that report is a piece of writing, and that is the reason that they are doing the regularly conducted business activity. But the report itself is not regularly conducted, and is, in fact, like the culmination of this research. It is not the research.
Well, it's not a distinction that I can see, because the report is the summation of the regularly conducted activity and the purpose of the regularly conducted activity. So the objection is overruled. Go ahead, Ms. Wu.
Yes, Your Honor. Please continue with your answer. I believe you were just finishing it up, Ms. Doncourt.
Right. So all the reports that I got back from my team led to the same conclusion, which is that Truffaut significantly increases the safety of our fertilizer for both the environment and for the people.
What else did you learn from the studies?
I also gathered some additional information, which they often do, about a process called baking our fertilizer.
Let's talk about baking. What is that treatment?
So baking our fertilizer would decrease any possible carcinogenic risks. However, from all the studies I received, carcinogenic risks were never detected in our fertilizer. So we did not go through with baking our fertilizer.
Now, does Lush not bake their products? Does Lush not bake all of their products then?
No, we do not. It just is unnecessary. As I said, we've done studies and we found no significant risks. And so it's unnecessary. The product is safe already.
Now, let's talk about the labels on your fertilizer as pertains to customer safety. Do you address customer safety on the fertilizer?
Yes, I mean, as all fertilizing companies should, we have safety recommendations that all those who use the fertilizer should be following when using the fertilizer.
Is there a label for specific risks because of Truffaut?
No, it's simply unnecessary. As I said, studies showed that there was no risks, so the EPA cleared it, as well as it goes with the national and state guidelines. So there was no need to put a specific warning label because of Truffaut.
Let's talk about the recommendations you mentioned earlier. Your Honor, permission for co-counsel to screen share what has been previously entered as Exhibit 1.
Granted.
Now, Ms. Doncourt, let's talk about these recommendations. What are the recommendations on your label?
All right, so it starts off by saying that those who use the product should wear long sleeves and long pants, to keep all those chemicals out from your skin, as that's how harmful chemicals can absorb into your skin. It also says to wear an N95 mask, which again prevents those chemicals from entering your system through your lungs.
Now, did you hear Mr. Weir's testify in court today?
Unfortunately, yes, I did.
And based on what you heard, did Mr. Weirs follow this warning label?
Unfortunately, no. By not covering up, by not wearing an N95 mask, and just using the product inappropriately in general, he did not follow any of the safety precautions.
Thank you. Co-counsel can stop screen sharing. Let's talk about the other fertilizers that we heard from about Mr. Weirs. What did you hear today about Mr. Weirs and using other fertilizers?
I heard that he used many, and of those many, we have no clue how many or what they actually were. So we have no way to trace exactly those chemicals he was using.
Why is that important?
It's important because, the agricultural field is known for having common negative effects. And by not being able to specify those other chemicals he was using, we really have no way of knowing what exactly causes non-Hodgkin lymphoma, unfortunately.
What risks are you able to control?
The risk I was able to control was the ones in my product, which we studied throughout those years of research. And through those years, we found no science or data that showed that the product was dangerous in any way.
What are you unable to control in this process?
Although I wish I could, I can't enforce those safety recommendations onto the people that use them. I wish I could, however, it puts themselves at danger, and there's really no way for me to implement that.
Now, let's talk about the claims Mr. Durst is making today. Have you ever heard Mr.'s claim before today?
No, I've never heard these claims before today.
While Mr. Durst was working for Lush, did he ever make these claims known to you?
Not at all, which, his job was to make these claims known to myself and the company, but we've never heard these claims until after he left our company and went to our biggest rival company.
Did you have any business documents with Mr. Durst?
Yes, he signed a non-compete agreement before being hired onto Lush.
Did he follow this?
Again, unfortunately, he did not. By going to a rival company within 2 years of leaving Lush, he specifically went against what was in that document.
No. Objection, Your Honor. Testifying to facts, not in evidence.
Ms. Wu?
Your Honor, this is not testifying to facts, not in evidence, as Ms. Doncourt is only stating that Mr. Durst did not follow that non-compete agreement. She is not testifying to the contents within that document.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes, you may.
I think Ms. Doncourt verbatim said that he did not follow the contents of, paraphrased actually, he did not follow the contents of that non-compete. So she is testifying to the contents of the non-compete by saying that Mr. Durst did not comply with them.
Ms. Wu?
Your Honor, I stand by my response.
What is the relevance of this testimony, Ms. Wu?
Your Honor, the relevance of this is to show that Mr. Durst did not follow a business document he had while working with Lush Fertilizer.
And how is that relevance to the claim of negligence?
Your Honor, this is relevant because it goes to the credibility of Mr. Durst, which is always at issue.
Well, I think that on cross-examination, the defense is, I'm sorry, this is a direct examination. On examination, the defense is allowed to bring evidence into the trial which goes to the credibility or the motive of the other party. So the objection is overruled.
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Doncor, as you've already answered the question, let's talk about what has already been entered as Exhibit 4, the email. Have you ever seen this email before?
Absolutely not. Not before this whole trial began.
Why is that?
Well, it's my understanding that this email is fabricated. I mean, I've never received the email, and the plaintiff's lawyers have actually looked through our entire email system, and that email has never been detected at all. So, I mean, it has to be fabricated, to my understanding.
Now, you mentioned reviewing studies earlier. How did the studies you review compare with Mr. Durst's claims?
They're the complete opposite. I mean, all the researchers and our team reached opposite conclusions that Ms. Durst is testifying to today.
Now, you've also mentioned the safety of your fertilizer multiple times. How can you guarantee the safety of Lush fertilizer?
By looking at the hard science and data, we are able to guarantee the product of our safety, or the safety of our product. And through all that science and all that data, no risk was ever detected. And I'm proud to be a part of the development of Drufo.
Thank you. No further questions at this time for this witness, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Ms. Taylor. You may cross-examine.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good evening, Ms. Doncourt.
Good evening.
Now, your products contain a chemical called Drufo.
Yes, that's correct.
And Drufo is supposed to limit environmental impact?
It does, yes.
And you claim that this chemical has little risk?
There is little to no risk. That's correct.
Now, let's talk about your company. You are the CEO of Lush Fertilizer, correct?
Yes, I am.
And Lush Fertilizer did some preliminary tests on Drufo.
We did years worth of tests, and we continue to do so through our toxicology research development team. Yes.
Thank you, Doncourt. And you heard Carson Durst's testimony today, correct?
That is correct, yes.
And you heard Carson Durst testify to what a superior told him about, quote, keeping Drufo's risks in the walls?
Yes, I'm aware that's what he said.
And you claim that you never would have put Drufo on the market if you thought it was carcinogenic.
I absolutely would not have. I mean, that's just a bad business decision overall, as well as goes against all of my morals.
Now, you don't personally oversee testing, correct?
I do not, but I do make sure that I get all the reports back so I can thoroughly look into those studies.
So you rely on your personnel to bring things to your attention?
I do, and I specifically hire them as educated and hardworking individuals.
And you are given reports on what happens in your company generally?
Correct. All the studies, all compile into reports, and I regularly receive them.
Now, things happen all the time in your company that you aren't personally made aware of.
I would like to think that I know everything about what goes on in my company.
Well, Ms. Doncourt, for example, you don't know which of your employees had coffee this morning.
No, however, that's not relevant, and I'm not sure they would let me know.
Sorry, if your personnel don't see fit to bring something to your attention, you simply don't know about it.
If it's something big, I'm sure they'd bring it to my attention.
I would hope they would bring it to your attention, correct?
Yes, as I am the CEO.
It's because you think you trust them, correct?
I do trust them, and they're hired and paid to do their job.
Thank you, Ms. Doncourt. Now let's move on. You say there aren't any valid studies showing Drufo is dangerous, correct?
That is correct. There are not any.
But there is a study from Dr. Casey Rogers.
There is, however, that's not a valid study, so that's not in my radar.
Ms. Doncourt, you don't agree with this study?
I do not, no.
And you don't mention any scientific education, yes or no?
I do not, however, as a CEO, I have looked over studies. I am aware.
Question. Now, you don't mention any experience as a researcher, yes or no?
I'm the CEO, and I look over those researchers who do their job. I know how to properly perform studies and research.
Ms. Doncourt, if you could please answer the question. You do not mention experience as a researcher.
I believe being a CEO of a leading developing company should be experience.
Ms. Doncourt, you are CEO and oversee people who carry out the research, correct?
Correct. I oversee all that they do.
Okay. So, Ms. Doncourt, in short, you are not a scientist.
I'm not. That's why I hire them.
Yes. Now, in your statement, you say that Drufo was below the threshold for immediate risk.
That is correct. They have no immediate risk.
No, you decided that the preliminaries were sufficient to determine this.
Excuse me, could you re-ask the question?
Yes, you decided that the preliminary testing you did was sufficient to determine that there was no immediate risk. Is that clear?
Yes, the years worth of studies and continuous studies have all shown no significant risk.
Well, you stopped the intensive testing once you were satisfied with development, correct?
That's correct. However, we continue to improve our product.
Ms. Doncourt, to go back to what you said that there was little risk with Drufo, correct?
That's correct. Like there's.
Excuse me, I didn't hear the objection, Your Honor.
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes, you may.
I don't think I have actually asked this question before. I'd ask for opposing counsel to point to where they think I did.
Yes, Your Honor, if I may respond. At the beginning of opposing counsel's cross-examination, she asked the witness if she believed there was little risk.
Ms. Taylor?
Your Honor, I do say you claimed there was little risk. That is correct.
Okay, well, I think there's a big difference between an introductory statement and then a line of questions trying to develop a point. So it may have been asked in one form. This is a slightly different form and a slightly different context. So I'm going to overrule the objection. Go ahead, Ms. Taylor.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Wonderful, thank you. Now to follow up with that, Ms. Doncourt, there was a risk, however small.
Just like there is a risk in chocolate to your dogs, there is a little risk to all agricultural products, yes.
But isn't it true that your scientists told you that baking the fertilizer would eliminate all forms of risk?
Nope, that is not correct. I can elaborate if you would like. In the report, the baking
no
process.
need, Ms. Doncourt. No need. Did not actually respond. Let's move on to baking. You say that baking would have been unnecessarily expensive, correct?
That is correct.
Ms. Doncourt, do you have your witness statement in front of you?
I do.
Now, Ms. Doncourt, if you could please turn to page 33 and
Yes,
look at line 110.
Yes.
And go ahead and read along with me. While baking the fertilizer would remove any risk that our fertilizer was carcinogenic, the baking process was just too expensive for the little risk it alleviated. Is that correct?
That is correct. It says there's.
Thank you, Ms. Doncourt. No, Ms. Doncourt, I just need to know if the words I said were correct. Were they?
Yes, that is what I see.
So you say that the baking would have been unnecessarily expensive.
That is correct. As it's already safe, I wouldn't throw money out the window for an unnecessary process.
So you knew that there was risk involved with Drufo.
There's little to no risks and no significant risk at that.
And you knew the risk was easily avoidable.
It is not easily avoidable. There is no way to make anything 100% safe.
Well, Ms. Doncourt, you still didn't bake the products, despite the ample safety it would have provided.
Well, it would only alleviate any carcinogenic risk. You're saying that would alleviate all forms of risk. Carcinogenic is only a small portion of possible diseases that come from agricultural products.
Okay,
however, all of those are below any significant risk.
Let me specify my question then. You knew the carcinogenic risk was easily avoidable, correct?
It is avoidable already, as the product is already.
Well, you claim to be an avowed, let's go ahead and move on, Ms. Doncourt. You claim to be an avowed environmentalist, correct?
That is correct.
And you very publicly donate a percentage of profits to the environment.
Yes, I do. It's very important to my company and myself.
Now, in your time as a corporate CEO, Ms. Doncourt, have you heard of the term greenwashing?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Ms. Taylor?
Your Honor, is the defense's theory of the case that Ms. Doncourt attempts to persuade the public that she is an environmentally sound person, despite the lack of care about people like Mr. Dakota Weirs, or the apathy involved with the risk that Drufo provides. And so whether or not she has heard of this term or engaged in this practice is relevant.
Ms. Wu?
Your Honor, this is not relevant to making any fact in this case more or less probable. In addition, Your Honor, I would ask that you instruct opposing counsel not to testify.
Well, I'm not going to do that because she is responding to your objection. So she has the right to make her statement. I don't see how this line of questioning of knowledge of greenwashing is relevant to the specific actions of the defendant vis-a-vis the plaintiff, and therefore I will sustain the objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
Very well, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Doncourt, is it your company's general practice to put people, oh, I'm so sorry. Everyone on my screen just froze. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes, you can.
Yes, I can.
If you guys are responding, I have no idea. Oh, okay. You guys just popped back up. Your Honor,
It's
I'm
a
so sorry
miracle.
about that. Do I have permission to proceed?
Yes, please do.
Okay, Ms. Doncourt. Despite you not being a scientist, you do believe strongly in helping the environment, correct?
That's correct. However, I don't see a correlation between the two. Nature is everything to me, and I want to do everything I can to make sure it's protected.
Thank you, Ms. Doncourt. And would you say that you care about people? Yes or no?
Oh, absolutely. Of course.
And Ms. Doncourt, if it came to people versus your product, Drufo, being baked, which would you pick?
The people. However, the people were already
Thank you,
safe
Ms.
as
Doncourt.
the product safe.
Thank you, Ms. Doncourt. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Ms. Wu, do you have any redirect within the scope of the cross?
Yes, Your Honor, briefly. Before I begin, may I request a time check?
Yes.
Your Honor, there are 15 minutes and 27 seconds remaining.
Thank you.
Ms.
Ms.
Doncourt,
Wu?
the values behind your decision-making has been questioned today on cross-examination. Is customer safety a priority?
Absolutely. Not a single step that our company has made has ever sacrificed the safety of those who use it or anyone's safety. Everything we do is for the environment and for those who use it.
Thank you. No further questions for this witness, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Then the witness is excused.
Your Honor, my scoring is complete.
Thank you.
Your Honor, I'm done scoring.
Your Honor, I'm also done scoring.
All right, thank you both. Defense, call your next witness, please.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Skylar Reeves to the stand.
I'll remind the witness that the oath taken at the beginning of these proceedings remains in effect. Ms.
Yes, Your
Knightman,
Honor.
go ahead.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Hello, my name is Skylar Weers, and I am an investigative journalist for The Rationalist magazine.
Do you know anybody in court today?
I do, yes. I know my twin brother, Dakota.
Why are you here testifying against your twin?
I'd honestly rather not be testifying against Dakota. It breaks my heart what he's going through, but I have to be here to do what's right, which is to tell the truth.
And what is the truth?
The truth about Drufo, which my research shows that there is no causal link between Drufo and cancer.
Now let's talk a little bit about your research. What did you review?
Well, I reviewed many different things for my research. And my research specifically was on modern agritech in this area. I reviewed different publications from various different agritech companies.
Was there anything else you looked at?
Yes, as I went through these different publications, I looked at every single study they mentioned and went through and reviewed those.
Did you look at anything else?
Yes, I reviewed a wealth of information from government databases.
Which ones?
I looked at information from the United States Department of Agriculture, as well as the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture.
And how long did you research this one specific area?
I researched it for nearly an entire year.
Was this considerable compared to your other articles?
Yes, it was. I mean, I spent a long time on my Modern Agritech series compared to my other series.
And did your research in the field of modern agritech grow your knowledge in that same area?
Yes, it did substantially.
Your Honor, the defense moves to enter Skylar Weirs as an expert in modern agritech pursuant to Rule 702 under experience, knowledge, and skill, as well as pursuant to the pretrial motions in which Judge Staub ruled that if the defense could show that Skylar Weirs spent a considerable amount of time reviewing multiple publications from modern agritech companies, the studies within those publications, and information from the United States Department of Agriculture and the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture, she would have more knowledge than the average juror and could be considered an expert in this case.
Could you repeat, because your microphone blurred it, what exactly the expertise of this witness is supposed to be?
Yes, Your Honor. This witness is supposed to be an expert in the field of modern agritech.
All right, thank you. Is there an objection?
Yes, Your Honor. If I may.
Right. Go ahead, Ms. Walton.
If I may conduct a brief voir dire of the witness.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Hello, Miss Weirs. You have no experience working with agricultural technology.
Well, I would say researching it for nearly a year is an experience enough.
But you have no experience working with it directly yourself.
Not working with it directly.
You have no degree in agricultural technology.
No, I do not. But again, my experience.
You were never trained in working with agricultural technology.
I've never been trained directly working with it. No.
Do you have knowledge of agricultural technology?
I do. Yes, nearly a year's worth of knowledge.
But you say it's a general knowledge.
General about the safety, yes.
You can't name any specific studies relating to your research on agricultural technology.
Well, I haven't entered them in exhibits as this case, so no.
You can't name any specific authors of studies relating to your research on agricultural technology.
Objection, Your Honor. This does not bring any sort of relevance to the expertise as a witness. This is the subject for cross-examination.
Your Honor.
Ms. Walton.
Yes, Your Honor. This is relevant to the pretrial ruling in terms of Ms. Weirs being able to give an understandable explanation of her qualifications. And as I'm speaking directly to her knowledge of agricultural technology, whether or not she can name specifics on her research is relevant to her expertise.
Response, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, opposing counsel is not asking for the specifics of Ms. Weirs' research. She's asking for authors or names of articles, not the contents within those research, which is not relevant to the expertise of Ms. Weirs in this case.
Well, Ms. Caniglio, I disagree with that because there is a pretrial ruling that if the witness can establish that the expertise and the specifics of how this person is able to render opinions, that this witness can be accepted as an expert. And what Ms. Walter seems to be doing is to try to show that while there is experience that the witness can testify to their specifics of how that person can, or what that person learned in the course of developing that expertise is pretty spotty. So I think she is fairly asking questions within the terms of the pretrial order and within the terms of a voir dire of this witness. So the objection is overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Weirs, you cannot name any specific authors of studies relating to research on agricultural technology.
Well, I looked at a lot of information from the United States Department of Agriculture, as well as the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture. And many of those information does not include an author, but it is from the government, so it's a reputable source.
You can not name any authors of the studies coming out of specific agricultural technology companies.
like I said, it's generally published through those actual, publications and everything. So they don't have specific authors included with that.
Ms. Weirs, you cannot name any specifics on where most of your research comes from.
Well, it actually comes from the government and different agri-tech companies. So yes, I can.
Your Honor, the plaintiff objects to Skylar Weirs testifying as an expert witness regarding modern agri-tech. According to Rule 702, a witness may be tendered as an expert if their knowledge in a field is classified as scientific, technical, or specialized. And Ms. Weirs does meet this criteria. However, Judge Staub's pretrial ruling required that the witness provide an understandable explanation of her qualifications, including the amount of time spent researching qualified agri-tech companies. Ms. Weirs has testified that she cannot name any specific companies and therefore cannot testify as an expert in the area of modern agri-tech. However, if Ms. Weirs is qualified as an expert in modern agricultural technology, we would ask that Ms. Weirs limit her testimony only to topics regarding modern agri-tech and does not offer opinions on the market or industry behavior, as that would be beyond the scope of agricultural technology.
Okay, I think that Rule 702 does allow the acceptance of a witness as an expert when that witness demonstrates knowledge or experience or skill in matters such as scientific, technical, or other sorts of knowledge that is beyond the scope of what a normal person would have information about. And in this instance, the witness has shown that she has performed research into agri-tech, substantial research under agri-tech, and has sufficiently shown the sources of those researches being based on reliable governmental information, and therefore the witness is accepted as an expert in the field of modern agri-tech.
Yes,
and
sir.
the objection is overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Coniglio, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Weirs, did you ever research Lush fertilizer?
I did, yes. It was one of the many other fertilizers I looked into.
What did you research about Lush fertilizer?
Well, I was looking at it in a general sense, but I also specifically looked into Drufo.
What did your research show about Drufo?
It showed that Drufo is it's an effective bonding agent, and that it works by bonding to the grass and the other chemicals within Lush fertilizer, and it essentially acts as a superglue.
Why is that important in today's case?
Well, it's important because all of these other chemicals within Lush fertilizer aren't released into the environment nearly as much as other fertilizers, and therefore it actually has to be applied less often than other fertilizers.
Did you research other fertilizers within modern agri-tech?
I did, yes.
And what did you find about them in comparison to Lush fertilizer?
I actually found a lot of information on their safety. Now, I found that no fertilizer will be 100% safe. However, there are some fertilizers that are safer than others.
Which fertilizers relevant to this case are safer than others?
Lush fertilizer is actually safer than other fertilizers because of its use of Drufo.
How does Drufo make Lush safer?
Well, like I was saying, it's a bonding agent, so all of these other chemicals aren't released into the environment nearly as much, and these other chemicals can impact the environment negatively.
Does the negative impact that these other chemicals have just impact the environment?
No, it actually releases into groundwaterways, which then releases into drinking water and also crops, and then into humans.
Now, Ms. Weirs, you said that Lush fertilizer is safer than other fertilizers because of their use of Drufo. Is Drufo the only thing that separates Lush fertilizer?
No, actually it is not.
What are some of the other things?
Well, nitrogen is the only severely harmful chemical used within Lush fertilizer. And the nitrogen exposure is actually reduced because of Drufo. And as well as there are other known carcinogens within other fertilizers like glyphosate and arsenic, but those aren't in Lush fertilizer.
Now, Ms. Sweers, I would like to talk a little bit about your relationship with your twin. Has your research impacted, or has your relationship with Dakota Weirs impacted your research?
Yes, actually it has.
How has it impacted your research?
It made me work harder. You see, I was actually researching Lush fertilizer before Dakota was diagnosed. And when he was diagnosed and he thought that Drufo had something to do with it, I looked into it because I wanted him to get closure as he was relying on speculation. But my research found that there is no causal link between Drufo and non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Now, as being Mr. Weir's twin, did he ever tell you about his job at Lush Fertilizer? Or at sorry, Ms. Weirs. Being Mr. Weir's twin, did he ever tell you about his job at Havens Landscaping?
Yes, I heard about him talk about it.
Did he tell you some of the fertilizers he used after his diagnosis?
He didn't tell me any specifics, but I know that he used multiple other fertilizers.
Thank you, Ms. Weirs. And within your research of Lush fertilizer compared to multiple other fertilizers, you talked about their safety. Is Mr. Weirs at a significant exposure risk with those other fertilizers?
Well, from what I learned, he never really covered up his skin and he didn't wear a mask to protect himself from inhalation.
Sorry, there's been an objection.
Yes, Your
Ms.
Honor.
Walther?
Objection, speculation.
Ms. Caniglio?
Your Honor, could opposing counsel clarify as to exactly what they find Ms. Weirs to be speculating on?
Yes, Your Honor. I'm objecting to speculation in terms of Ms. Weirs stated that her twin never really wore protective equipment. And regardless of the fact that Ms. Weirs is twins with Dakota Weirs, there's no reason that she could know that he never wore protective equipment.
Ms. Caniglio?
I can lay more foundation, Your Honor.
Well, yes, you could, and perhaps you should. However, it seemed to me that the witness testified that her knowledge came from her discussions with her twin brother. So I'm going to overrule the objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Ms. Weirs, in addition to your discussions with your brother, was there anything else that aided in your knowledge of his lack of covering up?
Yes, I heard him testify in court today that he did not wear protective gear.
Based off of all of what you've heard from Mr. Weirs and your own research, did he handle fertilizers as safely as he could have?
No, he did not. From what Dr. Rogers actually said, he could have wore protective gear to protect himself from all those other unknown carcinogens that are in other fertilizers.
And based off of all of your research, is Lush fertilizer the cause of Mr. Weirs' non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
In my expert opinion, I found that there is no causal link between Drufo and cancer, so no.
Thank you, Thank you, Ms. Weirs. Your Honor, I have no further questions at this time.
All right, thank you. Cross-examination, Ms. Walter?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes, you may.
Good afternoon, Ms. Weirs. I'd like to talk a bit about the work you do. You work for The Rationalist?
I do, yes.
You dropped out of college to pursue this career?
I actually never went to college in the first place because at one point, just before high school had ended, I produced an article that actually had really good feedback. And so I was, offered a job at The Rationalist and I accepted.
And for The Rationalist, you have published articles discussing agricultural technology?
Yes, I have.
Including Drufo?
Yes.
Ms. Weirs, you dispute the claim that Drufo causes non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
All of my research shows that there is no causal link.
You claim that it is just as safe, if not more, than its competitors' products.
Yes, I do.
But Ms. Weirs, you do not identify any of these other products.
Well, I don't have any specific other fertilizers mentioned. I do know that other fertilizers contain glyphosate and arsenic, which are known carcinogens.
You do not point to specific articles on these competitor products.
No, because once again, a lot of my information came from the government, and a lot of those things are convoluted, but they are all very clear to research.
You say that there are risks for modern agricultural products.
Of course, there will never be a 100% safe product in agriculture.
Because you say that every commercial pesticide has several well-known carcinogens.
Nearly everyone, yes.
Such as nitrates?
Nitrates, yes.
You say that pesticides are, by definition, poison.
Yes, they are.
Ms. Weirs, you agree that Drufo is a modern agricultural product?
Yes, it is.
You know that one of the ingredients listed in Drufo is nitrogen.
And like I said, that nitrogen exposure is lessened because of Drufo.
Nitrogen is known to contribute to various types of cancer.
Again, it's the only severely harmful chemical in lush fertilizer.
You cannot find any information on whether or not Drufo specifically causes cancer.
No, there is actually no conclusive evidence that shows that there is a causal link between Drufo and cancer.
You mentioned Drufo only needs to be applied once or twice a year, limiting users' exposure to the product.
Yes, it's a revolutionary product.
Therefore, you assert it is much safer for the environment.
Yes, that is actually what it shows.
And for people?
And for people, of course, because once your exposure is lessened, you are less likely to get harmful diseases.
So if a person were to use Drufo more than twice a year, it would be more dangerous for the user.
I cannot speculate on that.
It could be reasonably expected for a person working at a landscaping company to apply it more than twice a year.
Well, I guess it could be.
Thank you. You were never really close with your sibling, correct?
Objection,
well, we
Your
were
Honor.
closer in our younger
Relevance?
years.
There's an objection. Would you please restate the objection?
Yes, Your Honor. The objection is to relevance.
All right, Ms. Walter.
Yes, Your Honor. This evidence is being elicited to prove both motive and credibility, which is always at issue in the case.
Ms. Caniglio.
I stand by my objection, Your Honor.
All right, then it's overruled. Go ahead.
Ms. Weirs, you were never really close with your sibling.
We aren't close now, unfortunately.
He doesn't support your career.
Unfortunately, he doesn't. I wish he could, because I supported him when he played piano, but it's a little rough for me, but I just have to do what is right, and that's put out the scientific information to the world.
Ms. Weirs, he says you will write anything for the right price.
Objection, Your
I am
Honor.
saddened to think
Hearsay?
so.
There's an objection, hearsay. Ms. Walter.
Yes, Your Honor. This is being offered to prove the effect on the listener.
I'm sorry, I thought the question was whether the witness said ever that she would write anything for the right price.
I'm not the witness. I'm asking whether her sibling said that she would write anything for the right price.
I see. All right. Then it is a statement of a party, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Then the objection is overruled.
Ms. Weirs,
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Weirs, he says you will write anything for the right price,
I am saddened to think that he thinks that.
including articles about conspiracies.
Well, I mean, my job is to put out scientific data on different types of topics, and conspiracies may be some of those topics.
You don't make much money as an investigative journalist.
Unfortunately, no, but it's my passion, so I have to pursue it.
In fact, you had to pick up another job at Applebee's to pay the bills.
It's
Objection,
the
Your
perfect
Honor.
job.
Relevance?
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes, Ms. Walter.
Again, this goes to the motive of the witness, which is relevant.
How does this, her second job go to her motive?
Her financial status goes to her motive to testify in this case.
Is she being paid to testify?
I can move on, Your Honor.
You can move on.
Yes, Your
You're
Honor.
withdrawing the question?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Go ahead.
Ms. Weirs, you are involved in gambling.
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance?
Ms. Walter?
Yes, Your Honor. This goes to the witness's character for untruthfulness and, again, motive.
Ms. Caniglio?
Your Honor, whether or not the witness would have gambled a handful of times does not bear any relevance to any facts of the matter of the case, nor does it make her automatically untruthful or say that she has any sort of financial motivation in this case.
Well, I don't think the question is whether she's automatically truthful or untruthful. These are matters of degree that the witness or that the jury has the opportunity to listen to and evaluate whether the person is being truthful. I'm not sure what gambling has to do with truthfulness. Ms. Walter?
Yes, Your Honor. I would say that this goes rather to the witness's credibility as a whole, rather than just the character for truthfulness or untruthfulness.
You're saying that gamblers are inherently untruthful?
No, I'm saying that as I will continue in this line of questioning, I will illustrate why Miss Weir's gambling play into her credibility.
So you're going to link this up as you go along. Is that what I'm hearing you saying?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, then I will overrule the objection for now, but Ms. Caniglio, you are certainly encouraged to come back in if you think this is not being linked up.
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead, Ms. Walter.
Ms. Weirs, are you aware that the age for legal sports gambling is 21 years of age?
I am aware of that, yes, but everyone does, fantasy football and everything. So I just participated in that.
In your witness statement, you referenced a March Madness season a few years ago.
Yes, I do a variety of sports gambling. I'm really interested because it's the only way I can, connect to sports as I have a grass allergy.
So Ms. Weirs, being 20 years old today, you participated in sports gambling a few years ago.
Unfortunately, I did, yes, and I regret that now, but I did what I did when I was younger, just like Dakota didn't wear a mask when he was younger.
Which means you were underage during that March Madness and still are today.
Unfortunately so, but like I said, everyone makes mistakes.
So with this debt from underage sports gambling and the 2 underpaid jobs, you turned to your father for financial support.
No, actually, he used to help me pay off some of my gambling debts, but he does not now.
But you previously turned to him for support.
Well, my mother and him had offered to help me pay. I didn't necessarily turn to him, but my parents offered for me to pay, but then he stopped once I decided not to go to college.
And your own twin has immense expenses and medical bills.
Unfortunately so. This situation just breaks my heart.
For which your father pays for?
Yes, and I would like to help pay for that, but I don't have the money for it.
Ms. Weirs, you are worried about there being no money left after your father passes.
No, I am not.
Thank you, Ms. Weirs. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Right. Thank you. Ms. Caniglio, do you have any redirect within the scope of the cross?
Briefly, Your Honor. Ms. Weirs, opposing counsel brought up your gambling debts. Do you still gamble today?
I don't. I have learned my lesson and I am out of that world as soon as I can pay off my gambling debts.
And Ms. Weirs, do these gambling debts impact your financial bias to be here today?
Of course not. I would be here even if I wasn't getting paid. I just want to tell the truth about Truffaut.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
All right, thank you. Then the witness is excused.
Done scoring, Your Honor.
I'm done scoring, Your Honor.
I am as well, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Defense, you may call another witness if you have one.
Your Honor, the defense calls Dr. Devin Williams to the stand.
Remind the witness that they remain under the oath they took at the beginning of these proceedings. Go ahead, Mrs. McDermott.
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening, Dr. Williams. Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Good evening. My name is Dr. Devin Williams, and I'm the lead of the Research and Development Department at Lush Fertilizer.
And why are you here today?
I'm here today because I've conducted years of scientific studies that prove Drufo's safety.
Now, Dr. Williams, let's talk about your qualifications as a scientist, starting off with your education. Do you have any degrees in science?
Yes, I do. I have a Bachelor's of Science specializing in toxicology. I have a Master's of Science specializing in forensic toxicology. Along with that, I have a PhD in toxicology and pharmacology.
Anything else?
Yes, I was also in a post-PhD program at the University of Utah where I further deepened my knowledge of pharmacotoxicology.
Now, have you spent any time as an educator?
Yes, for 7 years, I was a professor at Colorado State University where I taught toxicology and medicinal chemistry. I especially love teaching my students all about the intricacies and little small aspects about medicinal chemistry. It was a really special time.
Dr. Williams, you previously testified to working at Lush Fertilizer. Have you conducted any studies with Lush?
Yes, I have conducted years of scientific studies at Lush Fertilizer, and every time that I start a new study, I get back a fond memory of participating in middle school STEM fairs and getting a few blue ribbons from that.
And finally, Dr. Williams, about how long have you been working in the field of toxicology?
I've been working with my degree since 1993, or 28 years. That's almost all of my professional life.
Your Honor, pursuant to Rule 702, the defense moves to enter Dr. Devin Williams as an expert in pharmacotoxicology and medicinal chemistry due to his education, training, and experience.
Is there an objection to the acceptance of Dr. Williams as an expert in the fields of pharmacotoxicology and medical toxicology? I'm not sure what the last one was.
Your Honor, it was medicinal chemistry.
Medicinal chemistry. All right. Is there an objection?
Your Honor, I have no objection to pharmacotoxicology, but I do not believe sufficient foundation has been laid as to the medicinal element of chemistry. While I am well aware that Dr. Williams has many qualifications in the fields of toxicology, just as Dr. Rogers does, I don't believe I heard anything about the medicinal aspects of chemistry, and there are no qualifications that Dr. Williams has in any field of medicine.
Response, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, Dr. Williams testified that as he is an educator, he has spent time teaching medicinal chemistry, and that gives him more knowledge than the average juror.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes, Your Honor. Though Dr. Williams has spent some time teaching medicinal chemistry, I don't believe that is sufficient enough under 702 to qualify him as an expert. I believe an expert needs to have specialized knowledge, and anyone can teach a course if they've given the right materials to teach it. You can have a gym teacher come and teach a history course if needed, and I believe that sufficient expertise would require a PhD or more foundation about the amount of time Dr. Williams prepared for teaching this class, the amount of studies he has had in the field of medicinal chemistry specifically.
Okay, well, I think that you are overstating the required qualifications for an expert witness. And I think that as he has taught a course or more in medicinal chemistry, that he has more knowledge than the average bearer, and therefore will be accepted as an expert in the fields of pharmacological toxicology and medicinal chemistry.
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Williams, you previously testified to working at Lush Fertilizer. Do you still work there today?
Proudly so.
And what do you do there?
My team and I examine the safety of the various products at Lush Fertilizer, and we look and ensure that they're safe for both our consumers and for the environment.
What product have you been focusing on most recently?
In recent years, I focused on our product, Drufo.
And what is Drufo?
Drufo is the flagship product of Lush Fertilizer, and it is changing the fertilizer industry with its revolutionary developments.
How is Drufo different from other fertilizer products in the industry to your knowledge?
Drufo is a bonding agent, meaning that it sticks to the plants that it's applied to. The fact that it sticks to the plants means that less fertilizer needs to be used.
How does this contribute to it being revolutionary?
Because less fertilizer needs to be used, this means that toxins from other companies' fertilizers will go into the soil, into the water, and into you less.
Dr. Williams, have you run any studies on DRUFO?
For the last 20 years, my team and I have run countless scientific studies on DRUFO.
And how do you conduct these scientific studies?
We examine the safety of DRUFO as compared to other fertilizers.
Objection, best evidence.
Could you explain your objection further?
Yes, Your Honor. To prove the content of a study, pursuant to Rule 102, 1002, excuse me, an original writing, recording, or photograph is required in order to prove its contents, regardless of whether or not the writing was provided in the case materials. And as they have not admitted any sort of study specifically, and in fact, they never mention a specific study in his witness statement, I believe they cannot testify to this information.
Response, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, pursuant to Rule 705, disclosing facts or data underlying an expert's opinion, an expert can testify to the data or their opinions without laying the further foundation for where their opinion came from, and as such, this goes above that rule.
I think that is correct, and the objection is overruled. Go ahead.
Dr. Williams, would you like me to re-ask the question?
Yes, please.
And Dr. Williams, how do you conduct these studies?
My team and I examine the safety of various other fertilizers as compared to DRUFO.
And have you gained any data from these studies?
Yes, we have gained a plethora of data from these studies.
And what did the compilation of this data tell you?
The data from my studies pointed to the fact that there is no statistical correlation between DRUFO and non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
What exactly does that mean?
This means that there is no increased likelihood of getting non-Hodgkin lymphoma between somebody who uses our product on a daily basis versus somebody who has never used our product.
Now, Dr. Williams, let's move on to talk about how this relates to the plaintiff. Did you hear the plaintiff testify today?
Yes, I did.
Did you hear him to testify to using other fertilizers?
I heard that too.
Do you know what's in other fertilizers?
I don't. Why could I, and how could I? And for that matter, how could the plaintiff know what's in those other fertilizers?
And Dr. Williams, do you know what's in DRUFO?
Yes, based on my research and scientific studies, I know that Lush fertilizer contains DRUFO, a revolutionary product, and that DRUFO and Lush fertilizer are safe.
How do you know that DRUFO is safe?
Know that DRUFO is safe because my team have run numerous scientific studies comparing DRUFO to other fertilizers, and all the data from these studies pointed directly to DRUFO's safety.
Why do you compare DRUFO to other fertilizers?
That's good science. Good science compares apples to apples. A study that would compare, say, apples to oranges, well, such a study would simply be invalid.
And what's an example of a study that would compare apples to oranges?
An unfortunate example of such a study is Dr. Rogers' study on DRUFO.
Do you have any specific knowledge about Dr. Rogers' study?
Yes, I reviewed the study when it came out.
And did you hear Dr. Rogers testify about the study today?
Yes, I did.
And does Dr. Rogers' study relate to the plaintiff at all?
Yes, just like you heard earlier in court today, Dr. Rogers was not able to control that her test subjects were exposed to chemicals other than DRUFO. This means that they were exposed to dangerous chemicals that are not Lush fertilizers. Similarly, Mr. Weirs, the plaintiff, was exposed to chemicals other than DRUFO, and we here at Lush know nothing about the chemical compounds of those dangerous products that the plaintiff was exposed to.
What does Lush know?
We know the statistical correlation between DRUFO and non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
And what is that correlation?
In my expert opinion, there is no statistical correlation between DRUFO and non-Hodgkin lymphoma. There's simply no evidence, no logic, and no probability for any other claim.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions. Your Honor, I believe you're muted.
You're right. How much time is left for the defendant?
Your Honor, there are 20 seconds left for the defendant.
All right. Thank you. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes.
Good evening, Dr. Williams. You weren't working for Lush when they conducted their studies in 2003, were you?
I was employed by Lush 10 years ago, and I wasn't there at the beginning. I frankly wish I was. It's a great company, and I wish I could have been employed by them longer, but
Right,
no, I
so
wasn't
you weren't there at the
employee in
beginning.
2003.
And you say the labs you worked in were concerned with Drufo's environmental impact.
That's one of the main aspects that we focused on, correct?
And you heard Mr. Weirs testify today that he'd heard concerns about Drufo on the news.
Anything can be on the news. Any pundit or
So that's
rival
a yes,
company can put
right,
anything
Dr.
out.
Williams?
I did hear Mr. Weirs, the plaintiff, say
And you
that.
never mentioned any studies specifically pertaining to Drufo's effect on humans other than the ones completed in 2003.
Well, I can reference to the studies that I personally conducted that point directly to Drufo's safety for humanity.
You never mention any of those studies specifically in your witness statement.
Not specifically, no.
No, you don't. And you never provide specific examples of data from those studies.
If I were, I would be leaking proprietary information. These studies
So that's a no, you don't provide that data.
No, I do
Objection,
not.
Objection, Your Honor. Your Honor, could you please instruct opposing counsel to let the witness answer their questions? Answer the questions in full.
Ms. Kenny?
Your Honor, were this a real trial in which we had all the time in the world, of course, the witness would be allowed to explain as they deem necessary. But as these questions are yes or no questions, and we are a time constraint, I would ask that the witness only answer the question that I am asking and not extrapolate further information that isn't necessary.
Well, I'm not going to instruct counsel on how she's going to cross-examine. And it's fair for the cross-examiner to attempt to control the witness when the witness is going out of bounds, whether this is, well, I'll leave it at that. Overruled. Go ahead, Ms. Kenny.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Dr. Williams, you never mentioned that baking Drufo would eliminate all risk.
No, I do not mention that in my witness statement.
And you don't cite any studies done outside of Lush Fertilizer that corroborate your evidence, do you?
The studies conducted inside of Lush Fertilizer are sufficient for my conclusion.
That was not my question, Dr. Williams. You don't cite any studies done outside of Lush Fertilizer.
While the scientific studies done by Lush Fertilizer are sufficient for my conclusion, I don't cite anything outside of Lush Fertilizer, no.
So that's a yes to my question. Thank you. And you don't mention any peer review of the studies Lush Fertilizer did.
Are various scientists inside of Lush peer review our studies, but there hasn't been any official outside peer review of our studies.
No outside peer review. And you don't mention any outside replication of the studies that Lush completed.
For there to be an honest replication of our studies, they would need to know the proprietary information of our chemicals, which would simply be unbecoming of us to release such a revolutionary.
So that's a no, Dr. Williams. You don't mention any replication of the studies outside of Lush Fertilizer.
None that I know of.
You also spend a large amount of time talking about why Drufo is good for the environment. Is that right?
Drufo is not only good for the environment, it's revolutionary for the environment.
Yes, revolutionary. In fact, Lush is currently looking to place fertilizers containing Drufo into the EU, yes?
We already have fertilizer in the European Union.
Containing Drufo, fertilizers containing Drufo.
We do not have fertilizers containing Drufo in the European Union at this time, and thus the European Union is receiving a worse version of our product.
Yes, Dr. Williams. And you've said in your witness statement that if this case comes out in favor of the plaintiff, that would create a whole host of bureaucratic roadblocks with the EU.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions at this time.
All right, thank you. There are, Ms. McDermott, you have 20 seconds left for redirect if you choose to use it.
No redirect necessary, Your Honor.
All right, then. Thank you. The witness is excused.
Your Honor, my scoring is complete.
scoring is complete, Your Honor.
The scoring is complete.
All right, thank you. Does the defense have another witness?
No, Your Honor, the defense rests.
Thank you. Then we are ready for closing arguments.
Your Honor, may I ask for a brief moment to resituate myself so that I may stand to give my closing argument?
You certainly may.
Thank you, Your Honor. I will be right back. All right. Lovely. I am ready to proceed whenever you are ready, Your Honor.
Then go ahead.
Thank you. How would you go about turning a little green leaf into gold? You couldn't, not without crushing the laws of nature. Lush Fertilizer uses their passion for the green environment to make their gold, and in doing so, they have crushed the life of Dakota Weirs. And without action, they will continue to crush the lives of countless others. Of course, you cannot base your decisions on emotion. Pursuant to jury instruction number 1, we, the plaintiff, have the burden of proof today and must prove our case by a preponderance of the evidence. This simply means to prove something is more probably true than not. Today, we were tasked with proving the negligence of Lush Fertilizer when they allowed their product to harm Mr. Dakota Weirs. Pursuant to jury instruction number 2, we needed to demonstrate this negligence by showing you that 1, Lush manufactured Drufo. 2, they failed to reasonably prevent risk to those using the product in the expected manner. 3, that Mr. Weirs used the product in that expected manner. And 4, that Mr. Weirs has damages caused by the product Drufo. Now let's just look at these elements just one at a time, shall we? Now, number 1, I think there's no dispute as to the fact that Lush manufactures Drufo. Now, number 2, Lush did complete some initial testing, yes, though none of the defense witnesses here today can actually tell you about that process. Carson Durst, however, was there, and he shared with you that at the culmination of that testing, concerns still existed regarding Drufo's link to cancers, such as non-Hodgkin lymphoma, and that concern was supposed to be kept within the walls. In fact, Lake Doncourt stated they never heard about any of these concerns, further illustrating Lush's failure to properly ensure the safety of their products. Lush chose not to bake the fertilizer. They chose not to continue testing. The only testing they continued after 2003 was about the environmental impact, not about its impact on humans. And they chose to purge their guilt through extensive donations, all to keep up this green pretense, masking their obsession with gold. Additionally, Lush failed to properly warn customers as dictated by jury instruction number 3. You've seen Exhibit 1, the user recommendation label, and you heard Dr. Rogers explain that a general fertilizer recommendation, giving general fertilizer recommendations, does not sufficiently warn users of the specific effects of Drufo. Now, number 3, we all agree that Dakota used Drufo. However, if Lush failed to properly test their products and failed to properly warn their customers, then there can be no expected manner in which Drufo was ever safe to use. Number 4, Drufo causes cancer. I'd like you all to remember that Dr. Williams wasn't present for the initial Drufo testing and has far more to say about the environmental impacts of Drufo than its safety. Skylar Weirs also never handled Drufo herself and got all of her information from the internet. Dr. Rogers is the only true expert in court today who included a specific Drufo-related study in her statement. Today, she explained that Mr. Weirs' lymphoma is more probably than not a product of his exposure to Drufo, citing specific evidence from her study. And of course, let us not forget the damages themselves. Mr. Weirs was headed to college, to Juilliard, to a new life. Not anymore. He may never return to that previous life, but he deserves compensation from the company that stole his world, his future. Today, the plaintiff has proven all 4 elements of negligence, and in accordance with jury instruction number 2, you must therefore find Lush Fertilizer liable for that negligence. We ask that Mr. Weirs be compensated for his pain and lost future in the amount of $21.9 million. That is $1,000 a day for the 60 years that would have been his life. Members of the jury, do not allow Lush fertilizer to escape the consequences of attempting to turn green into gold. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there time remaining for rebuttal if she chooses to use it?
Yes, there's 43 seconds remaining for any rebuttal.
All right, thank you. Defense, you may make your closing argument.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court? Speculation versus science. Your Honor, members of the jury, the plaintiff is basing his claim against Lush on speculation versus science. The plaintiff is speculating that Lush fertilizer caused his condition. However, the defense showed you the scientific evidence that proves the exact opposite. When Ms. Doncourt founded her company, she wanted to make a healthier place by creating the safest fertilizer on the market. And she did. How? By conducting countless studies over the course of multiple years. Studies that found Drufo significantly increases the safety of the fertilizer. Let me tell you about the science behind that. You heard Ms. Skylar Weirs testify that because of the revolutionary Drufo, Lush fertilizer needs to be applied less often, so there's less exposure to harmful substances. Less harmful substances in the soil, in the water, and in humans. That's science. You also heard Ms. Skylar Weirs testify that in her expert opinion, based on her extensive research, there is no causal link between Drufo and non-Hodgkin lymphoma. You heard Dr. Devin Williams confirm this. You heard his expert opinion based on his data, that there's no statistical correlation between Drufo and non-Hodgkin lymphoma. There's simply no evidence, no logic, no probability, no science. You also heard Ms. Doncourt did her due diligence. You heard that Lush Incorporated ensured the labels on the fertilizer are in line with EPA standards. You also heard Ms. Doncourt testify that the email Mr. Durst's claim is relying on is fabricated. In fact, the plaintiff's lawyers did not find any email of the sort in the company's email system. It wasn't willful, it wasn't ignorance, it certainly wasn't hidden. What you haven't heard today is any testimony from any witness that supports the plaintiff's claim that Lush tried to turn green into gold. The burden of proof in this case lies with the plaintiff. They must prove each and every claim of their claims by preponderance of the evidence, which means more likely than not. They have not met that burden. In fact, their evidence fell woefully short. You heard from Mr. Durst, a disgruntled ex-employee who is now working for the biggest competitor of Lush, a competitor that stands to benefit if the trial goes the way Mr. Durst wants it to. And he's standing here today with 19-year-old information he didn't make known even while it was his job to do so. That is a golden opportunity for speculation. Let's look back at the lack of science in the plaintiff's case. You heard from Dr. Rogers about a skewed study with an incomplete data set and variables she failed to control. So how can it be valid? It's not science. Finally, through our affirmative defense, you also learned about the plaintiff's negligence. You heard how the plaintiff was instructed multiple times to follow safety protocols. The protocols on the labels of the variety of chemicals he used, the protocols his boss told him to always take, and the protocols on the Lush label. In fact, you heard that the plaintiff did not follow these. The plaintiff couldn't even wear long sleeves. It was too hot. You also heard the plaintiff testified he used multiple fertilizers in this way. Fertilizers the defense knows nothing about. Nor for that matter does the plaintiff. There are too many possibilities because of his actions, and there's too much room for speculation. He knew those protocols were for his safety, and he chose to ignore them. Speculation versus science. The plaintiff's entire case is based on mere speculation, while the defense's is based in data, in probabilities, not possibilities. That is science. And while this is an unfortunate circumstance, the plaintiff's ask of $21.9 million in damages are completely unwarranted. There can be no compensation without causation, and the plaintiff has not shown causation. Thus, by comparative fault and affirmative defense, we ask you today to deny the plaintiff's speculative claim and rule in favor of Lush. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Plaintiff has 43 seconds for rebuttal if she chooses to use it.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes, you may.
The defense would like you to look at science over the speculation. And the plaintiff entirely agrees. They talk about this data, this mysterious data. I'd like you to ask yourselves, what data did you actually hear? Skylar Weirs' data came from the very websites that wanted to sell their products. And the data from Dr. Williams apparently was non-present, as when asked on cross-examination about that data, they couldn't seem to opine. Additionally, the defense would like to blame a 14-year-old child who didn't have restrictions enforced on their clothing over Lush Fertilizer, a company that knows what it's supposed to do. Find Lush Fertilizer liable. Thank you.
All right, thank you. The case will stand submitted. The scoring panelists may complete their score sheets and have them turned in. Make sure you have your telephone numbers on the scoring sheets.
I have submitted, Your Honor.
Thank you.
I have also submitted, Your Honor.
Thank you.
I submitted, Your Honor.
Thank you. Now, there's going to be some time for the central office to figure out whether these score sheets are complete. And while we're waiting for confirmation from the office, there is time for a little bit of feedback. The feedback needs to be short, 2 minutes at most. I'm going to keep track of the time and ask you to go ahead.
I'll start us off for feedback. First of all, congratulations for making it this far. Good job, everybody. I know the technology certainly complicates matters, and I think you all handled that very well. So congratulations.
Hey, everyone. Just to quickly introduce myself, my name is Jordan. I'm a law student at DU, and I'm actually on our national trial team. So I do exactly what you all do multiple times a year, and I know that it's really challenging. I was incredibly impressed by everybody's performance, and you all knew that case inside and out and were ready for what was thrown at you, whether it was objections, whether it was different facts being entered. You were truly ready, and I was genuinely impressed. So congratulations to all of you. I hope you continue this on because you were incredible advocates.
Congratulations. I was very impressed. You all did such a fantastic job. And I think the things I wanted to point out that I think you continue to work on and improve that would play well in front of the jury is that voice inflection, humanizing yourself, the gestures when they're appropriate, when they're not appropriate. Enunciating is so important. Oftentimes it's missed, and you got to stop those wandering witnesses that are allowed to keep going and going. And I think that's important, but not do it with an attitude and appear argumentative. But I'm very impressed. Everyone deserves a lot of applause. I'm so happy to see this high quality of presentation. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. And thank you for participating, using your time to judge these. I think one of the drawbacks of doing this virtually is that there isn't an opportunity for the scoring judges and the presiding judge, and particularly a gallery, to give a round of applause to people who have done an exceptionally fine job. I thought you guys laid out the points and made the story very clear. in what can be a confusing and contradictory sort of narrative, but the way each team pointed out the points that you wanted to make and pointed out the defects in the other team's presentation was very effective. And I was very impressed with it. Congratulations on doing an excellent job. And I wish you the best of luck as the competition goes forward tomorrow.
So our courtroom is dismissed because they do have all the score sheets.
All right, that is terrific. Get some rest. Have a good time tomorrow, and thank you very much.
Take care.
Your Honor, I have something really quick to just address with you, which doesn't pertain to anyone else, but just in case you have someone with they, them pronouns in a later trial, the honorific before a person with they, them pronouns is mix. Just I wasn't sure if you knew that or not, but I use they, them pronouns and my honorific is mix. So I just wanted to let you know in case you had someone else with they, them pronouns in a later trial.
Okay, thank you very much. I did not know that.
No worries at all. No worries at all. It's
all right.
New knowledge.
Take care.